Chapter 1250. Village Chief, sit here. Today the injured village chief was unusually popular. Usually he would not sit with the fathers and children for a meal, but with the children's strong welcome, the village chief also sat down. Not only that, he even sat in the middle. On his left were Kiki, Xianxian, and Kongkong. On his right were Nui, Nina, and Dajuan. Clearly, the village chief had become the center of attention for the children. This made the fathers jealous. Zhou Shimin smiled and said, "Where do you want your fathers to sit?" Of course, the children could not sit still. The dishes had not been served yet. Other than Nui and Nina, who sat beside the village chief to accompany him, the other children were very self-aware and were very willing to run around to help their fathers serve the dishes. The atmosphere was very lively. Kiki was very obedient. She held a bowl and spoon and scooped rice for everyone. The little girl's face was slightly red from the heat, and her beautiful bangs were also curled due to sweat. But she was fresh and beautiful, and looked more like a virtuous and beautiful master of my daughter. The dishes for the bamboo shoot banquet that the fathers had prepared meticulously, or rather, worked hard to prepare, began to be served one after another. The audience realized that it wasn't that there weren't any good cooks in this season. For example, Yang Gua should also be a good chef. Just like Chef Huang from the previous season and Zhang Liang from the previous season, they could all be considered to be great cooks. However, there was no situation where he stood out from the crowd. Even though it was a coincidence that he made the mistake, Poplar Fruit could not show off his excellent culinary skills. At most, he could only show off his knife skills. Without any work, no one could confirm that Poplar Fruit's culinary skills were good enough. So in everyone's opinion, the culinary skills of the fathers were all of the same level. They were neither good nor bad, or even slightly bad. Of course, the dishes they made were still edible, but they definitely would not reach the level of artistic dishes or delicacies of the first and second seasons. In this way, not only did it not make everyone feel awkward, but this kind of healthy competition made the show full of fun. For example, Poplar Fruit had cheated him of his noodles countless times. For example, Hujun had repeatedly tried to prove himself but was despised by his son. And then there was Lin Yongjian. Every time, he would show the confidence of the god of cookery in the early stages of cooking, but in the end, he would make a 180-degree turn and screw it up. This time, it was actually the same. Every father's dishes were edible, and the taste was not bad. However, they were still unanimously praised by the children. They didn't know what to say, but their father's cooking was delicious. Of course, what all the children were looking forward to was the bamboo shoots that Poplar Fruit was responsible for. This was because Poplar Fruit had only made a few bamboo buns, and the rest were made by the children themselves. It's cooked. Come on, serve the buns." Poplar Fruit smiled and walked out of the kitchen with a steaming plate. Although it took a long time to steam, it was worth the wait. As soon as he put it down, the children surrounded him with cheers. "Be careful, don't touch it first. It's very hot." The fathers quickly hugged their children, and the village chief and Sister Pomegranate also took care of Nui and Nina. "Don't touch it, point it to me. Which buns did you make just now?" Zhou Shimin smiled and asked Xianxian. "I want to see. It seems like I can't find it." Xianxian took a few glances. After steaming, the buns were still a little swollen and deformed, so he couldn't recognize them. He said anxiously, "I made 3-5. I want to eat. "Don't worry," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He pointed at the steamer and turned it around. From this scale, clockwise, they are Kongkong, Dajuan, Xianxian, Nui, and Nina. "Kiki and I made this." "Wow, you made such beautiful buns." "Xianxian, you're amazing." Zhou Shimin smiled and picked up the biggest one. He asked, "Did you make this for me?" Xianxian had been waiting with his mouth open for a long time. When he heard his father's words, he was anxious. He pulled his father's hand and said, No, it's to eat with me." On the other side, Hujun looked at his son and asked with a smile, "You made all these?" Kongzong nodded coldly. However, he was still looking forward to his father's evaluation of his work. He picked the one that looked the best and handed it over. Hujun looked at his son, who was pretending not to care, and was a little eager. He found it funny. He tore open the bun and took a bite, then handed the other half over. He said, "Try it and evaluate it yourself. It's delicious." Kong Kong took the bun and ate it happily. Wujun laughed. He rubbed his son's head and said, "Now you don't have to go against your conscience to evaluate your buns?" He then tasted the bun that his son had made with relish. Kong's own was still cold. Lin Yongjian was trying to reconcile with his son. He wanted to praise him, but when he saw the first bun with a small head and a big belly, he couldn't help but laugh and ask, "Did you make this?" "It's okay." He knew that he couldn't mock his son like that. He quickly smiled and said, "Dad can eat. Well, it's delicious." He really grabbed the failed product and ate it. "You should try this. I think it's the best." Jun didn't want to confront his father. He was afraid that his father would sulk like before. Now the little warm man was lively again. Nuyi and Nina were also sharing their works with the village chief and Sister Pomegranate, who they liked. Although the two children's works were the worst, they were very attentive and received praise from the village chief and Sister Pomegranate. "Kiki, are you going to give your panda bamboo bun to Dad?" Poplar Fruit also pulled a chair and sat down. He asked his daughter with a smile. He thought that his daughter's best work should be shared with her father, who told her to love Dad so much. However, Kiki turned around and ran to the village chief. The little girl was worried about the village chief's injury, so she gave the village chief a bun to express her concern. Well, although Poplar Fruit was a little surprised and sad, he was still happy for his daughter's kindness. However, when his daughter came back, Poplar Fruit picked up Kiki's two little braids and used them as a beard. His beard trembled and he said in a muffled voice, I'm so sad, because my daughter gave her best panda bun to someone else. Dad didn't even get to eat it. Dad was jealous. Poplar Fruit didn't hide it. Then I'll eat this with Dad. This is also super good. Dad, don't you think it's like a big motor? Kiki picked up another bun and said to her father, "You want to eat a big motor? You're so naughty." Poplar Fruit teased his daughter. No, The little girl's laughter was as pleasant as a silver bell, and her smiling face was the most beautiful scenery in the world. Chapter 1251. During the afternoon nap, Yanghua helped her daughter comb her hair. Although the little girl's hair was very good, soft and warm, and looked good even without special effects, after playing around for the whole morning, her hair was stuck together with sweat, and was about to be knotted. "I like Sister Pomegranate very much," Kiki said. "Is Sister Pomegranate the village chief's wife?" Why do you think so?" Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. "Because Sister Pomegranate is the OP. She is with the village chief, Kiki smiled innocently. "Sister Pomegranate is a guest invited by the village chief. She is not the village chief's wife." Poplar Fruit rubbed the little girl's head and laughed. "Do you think Sister Pomegranate and the village chief are bullying you?" "They are not bullying us. Sister Pomegranate and the village chief are fine. I like to play with her," Kiki said. "You like to play with Sister Pomegranate? But maybe Sister Pomegranate will go back to Hong Kong tonight," Poplar Fruit said. He was from Cantonese province, so he didn't need to learn Cantonese. He could speak it since he was young, so he could chat with Sister Pomegranate very intimately. Of course, this was also because Sister Shirlu did not have the arrogance of other people in Hong Kong who thought highly of themselves. He heard that Sister Pomegranate would leave tonight and go back to Hong Kong. She still had a movie to shoot. "Ah, going back?" Kiki pulled her father's hand and said sadly, "I will miss Sister Pomegranate very much." Sister Pomegranate said that if we go to Hong Kong to play, we can go find her, and then Sister Pomegranate will take us to Disneyland. Kiki adjusted herself and said happily. The main thing was that Hong Kong and Yangcheng weren't far. Poplar Fruit could drive, and if there was no traffic jam, it would take him 3 hours to get there. "Okay. Next time, let's invite Big Brother Kong Kong, Big Brother Nuyi and other good friends to play with Sister Pomegranate." Poplar Fruit laughed. He was quite happy to see that the children had such a good relationship with the guests and other uncles who participated in the show. This showed that the little guys were very kind and friendly, and they were not shy. In the afternoon, Poplar Fruit tied his daughter's hair into a bow at the back of her head. The main reason was that Poplar Fruit had heard about the venue for the event in the afternoon. It was a huge quagmire. Poplar Fruit, who had watched many Korean variety shows, knew that it was impossible to escape from being dirty. However, it was uncomfortable to have dirty hair, so it would definitely be beneficial to tie it up higher. Walking in the fields outside the earthen building, the children were all very excited, perhaps because they saw the bright sunlight and green rice fields. Especially Dejun, the big white toffee boy, kept sharing his happiness with each of his good friends. Brother Kong Kong, look, there's a big water buffalo over there. Nui, let's go play with the big water buffalo, okay? Nina, do you want a big water buffalo? The little boy had a crazy passion for every animal. Of course, if he did not keep shouting about killing sheep and cows, this passion would be quite good. Hey, are we going down? Kiki heard the village chief's instructions, hesitated for a moment, and raised her head to ask her father. Yes, we're going down to play games. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, Don't be afraid, the fields are very fun. I want Daddy to hold me. Seeing that the children had already walked down and were walking on the ridge of the fields, Kiki finally won over herself and reached out to hold her father's hand, wanting to follow. Lu Yi was not around, so Poplar Fruit and the other fathers were responsible for taking care of Nuyi and Nina. Poplar Fruit held Nina firmly in his arms with his left hand, and carefully held his daughter's hand with his right hand. He held Nuyi with one hand and Kong Kong with the other. Of course, President Kong Kong said that he was the big brother, and did not need his father to hold his hand while walking in front. Then President Kong Kong fell because it was too slippery. Poplar Fruit held Nina, but the little beauty was very dependent on him, and was also very afraid of the quagmire below, so she was unwilling to come down. Can you stand with your sister? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Oh. Nina shook her head and said, No, it's very dirty. Poplar Fruit was at his wit's end, but the children were very happy. They stood on the ridge of the fields and chattered. One moment, they saw a frog, and the next moment, another saw a loach. These children who grew up in the city were very excited. Of course, they were also happily shouting on the ridge of the fields. No one was willing to go down into the quagmire to play. Kiki was also the same. The little girl stood nervously on the spot, and did not dare to move, afraid that she would step into the quagmire. She was wearing denim shorts and slippers in the afternoon. Compared with the dark quagmire, the little girl's white skin was a little dazzling. She also had 10 cute little feet, lined up neatly outside the slippers, like 10 cute little elves. However, when the audience thought that it was a quagmire, they could not help but sweat for the little girl. Of course, they also inexplicably felt a little expectant. It was very sinful. Nina looked at her brother and sister enviously. Poplar Fruit wanted to strike while the iron was hot and coax her to come down and play with her brothers and sisters, but Nina still shook her head firmly. The little beauty's personality was actually a little similar to Kong Kong's. She was very friendly and liked to make friends, but she was a little cold and stubborn. She did not like mud, and Poplar Fruit could not persuade her no matter how hard he tried. Fortunately, the director's sister came over and took her to a clean open space to play. Poplar Fruit was then freed. Otherwise, he could not free himself to take care of his daughter. What was Kiki doing? She had already squatted down, and was excitedly watching the moving loaches in the quagmire. Generally, girls would be very afraid of these moving loaches, but Kiki was not. She was born with a magical affinity for all animals in the world. Not only animals liked her, but she also liked other animals. However, there was not much time for the children to play at this time. The village chief had already come over, and was ready to host the afternoon program. Good afternoon, everyone. The village chief's tone changed again. Last time he spoke in a dialect of Shaanxi, but this time he spoke in Hokkien. Of course, in Poplar Fruit's ears, the village chief's Hokkien was very bad. Kiki held her father's hand and giggled. She thought that the village chief's words were very funny. Wasn't it? The village head continued to say, Green mountain brine, green water. The sun is bright and beautiful. His words amused the surrounding villagers and made them grin. Next, let's give a round of applause to our friends from the Hucking Village's peasant team. Their name is Team That Loves to Work Hard to Win. The village chief said with a smile. As soon as his voice fell, Sister Pomegranate, who was wearing pajamas and had curly hair, valiantly walked out with a group of villagers' fathers and children. Sister Pomegranate. Kiki happily pulled her father's hand and jumped up. If it were not for Poplar Fruit's sharp eyes and quick hands, the little girl would have slipped and fallen. However, this time, the little guys were disappointed, because Sister Pomegranate did not stand on their side. Chapter 1252. The first game of the Quagmire program was to spin the chair. Of course, it was not to lift the chair and spin it. The game was to circle the long bench above the quagmire, but the requirement was that the body could not touch the quagmire. This game was not simple. Poplar Fruit had seen others play it in a Korean variety show. It was not just a matter of strength, but also the coordination of the four limbs. Before the fathers could react, Hoo-jun, who was the first to represent the fathers' team, was defeated. The small villager was not as strong or tall as Hoo-jun, but he was agile. He spun the chair twice, and Hoo-jun was still stuck in the first round. Brother Jun's muscles are too strong, he got stuck. Zo Shimin smiled at Poplar Fruit. It was one-sided, but the side was very lively. The children were shocked and cheered for Hoo-jun, especially Nuo-yi, who was shouting as if he was the one who was really competing. Hoo-jun was defeated, and the father's team was behind 0-1. The village chief asked, "Who's next?" "I'll do it." Yangguo raised her hand without any hesitation. Although their slogan was friendship first, competition second, Poplar Fruit did not want to lose too badly. After all, the program would not be exciting, and the children would be very disappointed. Just like the last time at the Yellow Plateau, Poplar Fruit did not play the game seriously. In the end, he did not win the lollipop and made his daughter cry. Later on, he regretted it a little. He was not competitive, but he should not admit defeat so easily. Poplar Fruit decided to go up himself and help the two fathers find a way to win. If Yangguo wanted to win, it would definitely not be a problem. After all, his skills were there. With just one hand, Yangguo would probably be able to freely flip over and over on the chair. However, for his teammates to win, Poplar Fruit slightly suppressed his fighting strength to find a way that was suitable for his teammates. Poplar Fruit walked slowly to the center of the quagmire. He rubbed his hands together and smiled confidently. However, the children behind him were different. Because of Uncle Hoo-jun's defeat, the children were not very confident. After all, in the eyes of the children, Uncle Hoo-jun was the strongest because he was the biggest. The short Xianxian's father and the skinny Kiki's father didn't look like experts at all. However, this did not stop the children from cheering for Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit had a good relationship with them, not only because of Kiki, Poplar Fruit's affinity, Poplar Fruit's friendliness, and Poplar Fruit's understanding of the children's psychological problems made Poplar Fruit the best adult friend in their hearts. Therefore, as soon as Poplar Fruit went on stage, the children shouted with all their might. Xianxian stood beside Chi-Chi's sister. Although he couldn't hold his sister's hand because Chi-Chi's sister was worriedly looking at his father, he turned his grief and anger into strength. Using his childish voice to shout loudly, he was really imposing. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved at the children. His smile was very relaxed, and it gave the children more confidence in him. With the village chief's command, the game began. Poplar Fruit didn't show a very good advantage at the beginning, because he was really thinking about how to turn around. In the first round, he used the same method as all the other fathers. It was a little difficult to hang himself up, and then slowly turn around. Poplar Fruit suppressed his strength, and almost couldn't turn over. Fortunately, his waist and abdomen strength were also very strong. This won't work. If it was Lin Yongjian, this method would definitely not be able to turn over. Therefore, in the second round, Poplar Fruit changed the method, and it was effective. However, in the eyes of the children, Uncle Poplar Fruit's victory was very thrilling. In the first round, Poplar Fruit was a little behind. In the eyes of the children, they were so nervous that they couldn't help but cheer loudly. Kiki was even more worried about her father. She was so worried that her little face was red. When Dejun saw this, he quickly restrained his smile, worried that it would irritate his good friend. Fortunately, in the second round, Poplar Fruit won cleanly. "We won." Zo Shimin led the children and waved their hands and cheered. Poplar Fruit smiled and raised his hands very cooperatively, just like an Olympic champion. The little girl finally recovered her joyful smile. She felt that her father, who had succeeded in a big reversal, was really too handsome. At this time, she wanted to throw herself into her father's arms and give him a sweet kiss after his triumphant return. Kiki giggled, stretched out her hands and skipped, asking her father to hurry over. When Kiki was sad, she was as pitiful and heartbreaking as burial flowers. However, when she smiled happily, she was like a cute and lively deer, making the audience very fond of her. However, the happy little girl forgot that she was standing on a narrow ridge in the fields. As the little deer jumped, she accidentally fell with a plop. No one expected this to happen. Even when Kiki slipped and fell into the quagmire, everyone except Poplar Fruit was still smiling and immersed in the joy of Poplar Fruit's victory. Poplar Fruit was the first to react. When his daughter slipped and didn't fall, Poplar Fruit saw it. Immediately, Poplar Fruit stepped on the quagmire and rushed over. However, Poplar Fruit couldn't adapt quickly to the quagmire. He ran faster, but the reaction force was stronger. His upper body rushed out, but his feet were still in the same place. Or rather, they were restrained. The result was that Poplar Fruit also fell. The little girl's reaction was actually quite fast. She didn't fall too badly, but she knelt on the ground with her hands in the quagmire. Without looking, the little girl's face was splashed with mud. Poplar Fruit was quite clean just now, but his feet were dirty. However, for his daughter, Poplar Fruit didn't care about his image. He rolled and crawled to his daughter's side and hugged the little girl, whose mouth was already puckered. The cameraman accurately gave Poplar Fruit a detail. At this moment, the handsome guy's face was full of heartache, as if the pain was 1,000 times worse. The moment he hugged his daughter, the strong fatherly love almost moved the audience to tears. Ooh! The little girl's mouth was puckered and she was already crying. She closed her eyes tightly and rubbed her face with her arms, trying to wipe off the mud that splashed on her face. However, the more she wiped, the darker her face became. She looked like a little kitten. It wasn't that she was crying because of the pain. Kiki was frightened. When she fell, the mud that she had never touched before, which was very scary in Kiki's eyes, directly hit her face. She couldn't dodge it. It's okay. Poplar Fruit smiled. His nervousness had already passed. He patted his daughter's back and comforted her. It's not scary at all. Look, Daddy is as black as you. In order to make his daughter not nervous, Poplar Fruit smiled and wiped the mud from his daughter's body on his face. He even made faces to tease her. Chapter 1253. When Kiki fell, no one reacted. Fortunately, after Poplar Fruit picked up Kiki, the fathers immediately took action. Lin Yongjian was the closest to the edge of the quagmire. He took a bottle of mineral water from the staff and walked to Poplar Fruit's side. Chi-Chi still hadn't recovered from the shock. Although she didn't wipe her face that looked like a kitten, she still didn't dare to open her eyes. Her two hands clutched the front of her father's clothes as she sobbed. Besides Hujun, who had to take care of Nui, Zhou Shimin also tried to persuade her, but to no avail. It's okay. There's nothing to be afraid of. Isn't it just a little mud? Poplar Fruit smiled. He was now relieved that it was not too serious. He saw Lin Yongjian come over and told his daughter, Uncle Lin will bring you some water to wash your face. Close your eyes. Just rinse it with water, and it'll be clean. Lin Yongjian was a little impatient as a father, but he was definitely a father who loved his child very much. When he washed Kiki's face with mineral water, his movements were not only gentle, but also very clean. Her face was clean and refreshing. Kiki also stopped crying and opened her eyes. She even sobbed a few times with a little grievance. Poplar Fruit smiled and said to Lin Yongjian, she's fine. It's normal to fall. She just fell into the quagmire and got scared. The child is quite strong. She said she wouldn't cry, and now she won't cry. Wash your hands again. Lin Yongjian smiled and looked at Kiki, praising her. He now looked at all the children well, but his son's performance was not good, which made him a little worried. It's quite clean. Little face, not dirty at all. Poplar Fruit looked at his daughter's eyes with a smile. His affirmation was more effective than any mirror. The little girl who was still sobbing immediately recovered. She happily turned her little face left and right for her father to verify. She even asked, "Really? Of course it's not dirty. Our princess sister is the most beautiful." Walking back to the ridge, Zhou Shimin echoed with a smile, causing the little girl to giggle shyly. Kiki stopped crying, and she began to feel sorry for her father. The little girl was in her father's arms. She reached out her freshly washed little hand and touched the mud stain that her father had smeared on her face to coax her. She pouted and said, "Papa is also dirty and ugly." "It's okay. It's just mud. Daddy is not afraid," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "And how is it ugly? Xian, do I look handsome like this?" In order to prove himself, Poplar Fruit turned his head and asked little fatty Xian, who was still looking up at his dirty clothes. Little fatty Xian nodded his head respectfully. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Look, even Xian said I'm very handsome. My clothes are dirty." It was only now that Chi-Chi, who had climbed down from her father's body and stood cautiously on the ridge of the field once more, finally paid attention to her clothes. Although her little face had been washed clean, her body and clothes were still wet and sticky. Her originally clean clothes were now splashed with mud. "It's okay. If the clothes are dirty, then so be it. I'll wash them when we get back," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Daddy doesn't dislike you. Now that Daddy's clothes are dirty, will you dislike Daddy?" Poplar Fruit secretly changed the topic and diverted Kiki's attention. Papa is dirty and smelly. I don't want Papa anymore." Kiki's thoughts were becoming more and more independent. She began to joke with her father, but the little girl's undisguised laughter could not fool anyone at all. But Poplar Fruit still wanted to continue to tease his daughter. He directly stepped his feet into the mud, and then sat on the ridge. He rubbed his eyes with both hands and deliberately cried, "My daughter doesn't want me anymore. I'm so sad." At this time, Chi-Chi happily turned around and threw herself into her father's arms. She first kissed her father on the other side of his face that was still clean. Then, she used her little arms to hang around her father's neck. The little girl smiled sweetly and said, "No way, I was just lying to you." Poplar Fruit also happily hugged his daughter. The warmth of this father and daughter pair was very enviable. However, the game was still going on. After a pause, the village chief took control of the situation again. Next, the third group of contestants went on stage. This time, it was Zhou Shimin's turn to go on stage. Poplar Fruit still believed in Zhou Shimin's skills. He secretly pulled Lin Yongjian, who was going to go on stage next, to discuss the tactics with him. "Brother Lin, you can do this. First, you can hang up. Then use your legs to flip over. It's the method I used the second time. You saw it right? It's very useful. You just need to pay attention." Poplar Fruit's method was actually a very common horizontal bar game. You need to flip over half of your body, and then use gravity to lift up your body. In this way, the waist, abdomen, and arms would not need too much strength. While they were talking, Kiki and Xian were trying their best to cheer for Zhou Shimin. Because little chubby Xian was brave and not afraid of getting dirty, he finally got his wish to hold Sister Kiki's hand. Looking at his unconcealable smile, he was very happy in his heart. Although the little girl was dirty now, a princess was still a princess. After falling into the mortal world and stirring up trouble in the mortal world, she was still a princess after washing off her filth and wearing plain clothes. Of course, it also added a bit of friendliness to her image, making her even more popular with the audience. In the end, Zhou Shimin did not disappoint. He won the game very quickly, even faster than Poplar Fruit. This was very normal. After all, Poplar Fruit did not use his full strength. "Teacher Lin, you can do it." Lin Yongjian went on stage. The father's team applauded and cheered. In fact, the audience did not have much hope for him. However, in the scene just now, everyone saw Poplar Fruit doing training with him. It could not help but reignite their hope. However, just like last time, Poplar Fruit's secret was useless. This time, Lin Yongjian once again turned into a national football team. No matter how good the method was, it could not help his thin and weak body. After he flipped over twice, Lin Yongjian was still hanging on the bench, trembling. The villagers who had finished the game wanted to run over to help him. Unfortunately, Lin Yongjian had already exhausted his strength and fell directly into the quagmire. This fall wasn't unexpected, but it was still hair-raising. The children were all shocked. The lively atmosphere just now had disappeared. It's okay, it's okay. Lin Yongjian was still the same as last time when he lost the game. He laughed heartily and even gave the other party a thumbs up. It was a 2-2 tie. What should they do? Of course, they had to compete again. Originally, the fathers wanted to drag the village chief down with them. In the end, the village chief, who was wearing a white t-shirt, righteously refused. Thus, the fathers could only choose one person to compete again. Who should they choose? The villagers expressed that they could choose anyone other than the Olympic champion Zhou Shimin. Poplar Fruit was amused. They were looking down on him. Although he had just lost the game, did they really think that he was weak? Therefore, Poplar Fruit was going to fight again. To be honest, the result of the game was obvious. There was nothing to say. However, before Poplar Fruit went on the field, Kiki was still nervous for a while. Papa, don't go, okay? I'm afraid that you will fall and get hurt. The little girl's voice was soft and warm, which made the eyes of the audience in front of the TV jump with big hearts. It's okay. Papa won't fall, and it won't hurt. You felt it yourself just now, right? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. And Kiki, don't you think this game is very fun? Don't be afraid. Papa will go up and win again for you, okay? Chapter 1254. Poplar Fruit won the extra game without a single drop of blood. In the end, his father's team won. Yang Guo also had a rare moment of excitement. She cheered and ran over to the 5 children one by one to celebrate. Dejun come high_5. Xian come. Seeing this scene, the audience laughed one after another. Poplar Fruit was usually very calm, so calm that it didn't match his age. He was more like an old man in his 70s or 80s. This made it difficult for him to have any outstanding performance in the variety show. If it weren't for Kiki's lively and cute appearance, the real Poplar Fruit probably wouldn't even have the chance to be broadcasted. His liveliness this time let everyone see his passion. Poplar Fruit was only 27 years old, but his performance unexpectedly became a surprise. Before the start of the next game, the village chief had to do a warm-up. Because the children had to work together with their fathers to participate in the competition, the children had to go down to the quagmire to get used to it. The first one to take the first step was not Kiki, who had already been stained with mud, but Kong Kong. The little boy carefully stepped into the quagmire with his father's support and encouragement. Mr. Kong Kong's skin was very white. His face was a little darker than his father's, but his legs were white and clean. At first glance, it was obvious that he was the son of a rich family. But he did go down bravely and gave his younger brothers and sisters a good start. Let's go down and play too, okay? Poplar Fruit looked at his daughter and asked with a smile. But it's dirty. Kiki saw that her friends had started to go down one after another, and she was a little eager to give it a try. But when she was about to step into the quagmire, the little girl shrank back, frowning and hesitating. Poplar Fruit held his daughter's hand and gently persuaded her. It's okay. Since it's dirty, let's play happily and wash it when we get back. Didn't you want to play with the frogs just now? There are frogs and other small animals here. Look. Kiki originally refused, but when she followed her father's finger and saw the swaying eels in the quagmire, her curiosity overcame her fear of the quagmire, and she slowly walked down with her father's help. It's soft. After taking 2 steps, the little girl raised her head and smiled at her father. It's so fun. It looked disgusting from the top, but it was a completely different feeling after actually walking down. The quagmire was very interesting. It was a bit like walking in snow, but the feeling of massaging the soles of the feet was far better than snow. The quagmire was not disgusting at all. There were people in the world who used mud for medicinal baths. Of course, that was a special kind of mud. However, the quagmire that Poplar Fruit and the others were playing in was also very clean and fertile. It would be the best mud for planting crops in the future. Seeing so many ricefield eels, one could tell. Speaking of ricefield eels, the thing that Kiki was most curious about was ricefield eels, because she had never seen one before. It was not that Kiki had never lived in the countryside. Her previous experience in Xiong village, and when she went home to play during the spring festival, the little girl's knowledge was much richer than that of ordinary city children. However, Kiki had never seen a creature like ricefield eel that only lived in the mud, not to mention that the ricefield eels here were so big. "Papa, I can't walk anymore." The little girl was pulled by her father and moved her feet with difficulty. She originally wanted to catch the ricefield eel, but when a lively deer fell into the quagmire, it could only become a clumsy little turtle. "It's okay. Take your time. We can't walk too fast in the quagmire. If we walk too fast, we will fall," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. But Papa, help me catch that snake, okay?" Kiki was a little anxious and shook her father's hand excitedly. "What snake?" "That's a ricefield eel." Kiki admitted her mistake. She couldn't walk. She looked at the ricefield eel that had just emerged not far in front of her. Before she could reach it, it would drill into the mud again. How could she not be anxious? However, the little girl's unintentional and naive words scared the rest of her friends. Originally, when little Chuangshuan saw how brave his sister was, he also had one foot in the quagmire. But when he heard that there was a snake, little Chuangshuan was so scared that he quickly withdrew his foot. "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Zhou Shimin was puzzled and laughed at his son. There is a snake." Xian was so anxious that he was about to cry. Little Chuangshuan felt that what Kiki said was definitely right. She was so smart and so beautiful. Of course, the latter reason was the most important. "Where is the snake?" "There is no snake," Zhou Shimin said with a smile. On the other side, Poplar Fruit had already caught the ricefield eel that was drilling into the mud. This ricefield eel was too fat. It was as thick as Poplar Fruit's pinky finger, and as long as his palm. If he used it to fish, he would definitely be able to catch a big fish that weighed a few pounds. Poplar Fruit stroked the large chunks of mud on the eel, and said to the frightened Xian with a smile, Xian, this is not a snake. It is an eel. It won't bite. Look, Uncle can play with it." "Papa, give it to me. Let me see." Kiki couldn't wait to reach out her thin little arms to her father. At this time, the little girl really didn't act like a girl. Girls were afraid of this kind of mollusk, but she had an excited look on her face. It was as if Frankenstein had encountered a white mouse. Yanghua, on the other hand, was not surprised. He handed the eel to his daughter and looked at his daughter holding the eel as if it was a rare treasure with a smile on his face. When Papa was young, he also dug ricefield eels. Poplar Fruit introduced the ricefield eel to his daughter, and let her understand the creature that she thought was a snake. Then he said as if he was telling a story, "But the eel that Papa dug at that time was not that big." And then, the little girl looked at her father with admiration and asked, "Papa, did you raise the eel until it was big?" "Then I set it free. Ricefield eels can't be raised at home. They like to play freely in nature. You see, this is their home," Poplar Fruit said with a smile as he pointed to the quagmire. "Is that so?" Kiki was a little disappointed. She did want to bring the eel home, but the little girl was very kind. She would not restrict the freedom of other small animals for her own ideas. Xian, look, this is my watch." "Ha ha ha ha." Kiki was still very happy. She raised her hand and said to her brother, who had just mustered up the courage to walk into the quagmire. The ricefield eel curled up in Kiki's white as jade wrist. It looked like a watch. Xian, do you want to play? Uncle will catch an eel for you," Poplar Fruit asked Xian with a smile. Now Kiki could stand firmly, but Xian still needed his father to take care of him. No need. Xian hurriedly waved his hand and refused. In fact, Xian was not very interested in the ricefield eel. In his heart, there was still the shadow of the ricefield eel is a snake. The spectators all started to laugh. As onlookers, they were able to see more clearly and realized that Xian was looking at his sister. Even his sister's delicate little hands made little fatty Xian infatuated. He was not looking at the ricefield eel. Chapter 1255. The small eel caused a lot of laughter and cheers. Kong was scared at the beginning, then he was scared and liked it. Slowly he was able to grab one and play with it. When he was happy, he stepped into the mud and went to the ridge to share it with his good friend, Sister Shirlu. Hey, don't come over. I'm warning you. Sister Shirlu waved her fan and fought with Kong Kong. It was hard to tell if she was really scared or just faking it. The adults and children were very lively. I caught a lot of fish. Nuoi was the same as Kiki. He was not afraid of the eel. Instead, he liked it very much. He asked Hujun to help him catch one, but one or two were not enough. In the end, both of his hands were full of eels. Nina, I caught them. There are so many of them. Let's bring this fish to our house? He was very happy. He took the eel and asked Uncle Hujun to carry it to the open space on the opposite side. He wanted to show it off to his sister. However, Nina was obviously a normal girl. Although she stretched out her hand and wanted to try it like her brother, she retracted her hand in fear before she could touch it. Nui, my clothes are dirty. Nina was a mixed-blood beauty. Of course, she was more like her mother. However, the way she spoke was the same as Nuoyi's. She had learned it from her father, Luyi. She had a northeastern accent, and it sounded quite interesting. It's okay. Nuoi did not care about his clothes. The little boy looked at the eel in his hand happily. Kiki, I'll give you mine. After Kong Kong let go of Sister Shirlu, he struggled to walk in the mud and came to Kiki to play with him. Brother Kong Kong, I don't want it anymore. Kiki giggled. She waved her hand and said, Papa said that nature is their home. Then I'll let it go too. Kong Kong bent down and lowered his head. He put the eel in his hand into the mud. Hey. For some unknown reason, perhaps because he saw his favorite sister chatting happily with brother Kong Kong, Xian was so sad that he could not stand properly and sat down in the mud. Are you okay? Kong Kong was closer and turned to his friends. Xian, what happened to you? When Chi-Chi saw the commotion, she giggled and walked over unsteadily, one step at a time. Originally, Zhou Shimin wanted to help his son up when he saw him fall, but when he saw the two children coming over very enthusiastically, he consciously moved to the side. I can't get up. Xian was such a big guy sitting in the quagmire. Half of his clothes were dirty, and his curly hair was raised. He actually looked a little pitiful. Don't worry, I'll help you. CEO Kong was very enthusiastic. He bent down and hugged Xian's wrists with both hands. Then he used all his strength to push Xian back. However, he had obviously underestimated Xian's weight and the stickiness of the quagmire. Despite using all his strength, Xian still did not move an inch. Xian, I told you not to eat so much. I can't even move you. Zhou Shimin said with a smile. I'm not that heavy, Xian explained anxiously. Xian, don't be afraid. Sister is here. Kiki finally arrived. She was afraid of falling, so she did not walk as fast as Brother Kong. But to Xian, this was undoubtedly the sound of nature. It was really like the saying, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Kong Kong and Kiki each grabbed one of Xian's hands and used all their strength. Kiki was very strong, but it was also a little difficult. Zhou Shimin saw that the two children were using so much strength to pull his son up. He smiled and wanted to help, but Xian did indeed slowly get up. Xian did get up, but he looked at his sister and smiled foolishly. He was pulled up, but he only cared about looking at his sister, and did not pay attention to himself. In the end, when Kiki and Kong Kong both thought that Xian could get up, they loosened their grip and Xian sat on the ground again. This time, Kiki and Kong Kong were caught off guard, and were pulled to the ground by Xian. Xian. Kiki called out and smiled. She was a little annoyed, but she was not angry. The three children rolled into a ball, but Kiki and Kong Kong were in a worse state than Xian. Because they were pulled down, they were about to become muddy children. It's okay, let's pat them. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimin were originally just watching the show with a smile, but when they saw that the three children had fallen, they quickly came over to help them. They could not help but laugh. The three children were too funny, especially Xian. He sat there and smiled foolishly after making a mistake. See? You don't believe me when I say you're heavy. Zhou Shimin patted his son's butt and smiled. There were also little Chuangshuan's fans who made a gif of this, jokingly saying, "I feel sorry for little Chuangshuan, he's not fat, he's strong." Although they fell into a ball, the children were still very happy. Even Kong Kong, who was afraid of getting dirty, did not seem to care at all. However, on the ridge of the field, Dejun was on the verge of tears. In the afternoon, he and his father wore a parent-child outfit. They were both white t-shirts with a blindfolded fat cat printed on them. But unlike the other children, Dejun was a Virgo. He stood carefully on the ridge of the field. No matter how Lin Yongjian persuaded him, he was not willing to go down. "We'll take you to find eels. Let's go, there's also Little Frog." The village chief came to help persuade him, but it was useless. Lin Yongjian actually wanted to be a patient father, but no matter how hard he tried to persuade him, Dejun was still unwilling. He said to his father unhappily, "But even if I don't want to go down, you still want me to go down. Why are you doing this?" "I'm afraid of getting dirty." Dejun pouted. He turned around and wanted to go up. Lin Yongjian wanted to act first and report later. He wanted to carry Dejun and put him in the mud. Maybe he would not be afraid then. However, Dejun hugged his father with all his might. He hooked his father's leg and shrunk his whole body. He inevitably stepped into the mud, but the boy who loved cleanliness immediately shrank back to the ridge of the field. This time he lost control of his emotions. Not only did his eyes turn red and tears flowed out, he also made a big fuss and was unwilling to go down. Lin Yongjian was really at his wits' end. "Let's go, you three little friends. Go and invite Dejun to come down and play." Poplar Fruit waved his hand and smiled as he led the three children to Dejun. "Big brother Dejun, let's play together." Kiki walked over and wanted to pull Dejun, who was tiptoeing with his muddy feet. However, Dejun saw that her hands were black and was scared away. "Dejun, let me tell you, there are eels in here. Do you want me to ask my father to catch one for you?" Kong Kong also tried his best to invite his little friends. "Big brother Dejun, come on, come on." Xian Xian was very enthusiastic. He helped Dejun pour out the mud in his slippers, and then used his cute voice to act coquettishly. Chapter 1256. I'm not going down. I'm not going down. Sob sob. I want to wipe it clean. He did not like the quagmire from the bottom of his heart. No matter how his friends tried to persuade him, Dejun stubbornly stuck out his neck and refused. The fathers were at their wits' end. The village chief could only mediate. It's fine. We'll do it bit by bit. There's no rush." Kiki and the rest also lost interest and returned to the quagmire to continue playing. Nuhi also returned from his sister's side. The four of them were giggling as they held hands and played in the quagmire. They were very happy. Although there were situations where they kept falling, they were very brave and immediately stood up. Poplar Fruit and the other fathers also accompanied them. Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit, Zhou Shimin and Hujun were very strong. They took turns to lift the children up from the quagmire. They did not really throw them into the air, but there was a tossing motion that allowed the children to experience the feeling of bungee jumping. Kiki loved this kind of play. She was thrown into the air, and then caught by her father's strong hands. It was so exciting that she screamed and laughed. "Throw high." Zhou Shimin also threw his son up. Little chubby Xian was not afraid at all. He laughed foolishly, and when he landed, he turned his head to look at his sister Kiki. It was as if he was saying, Sister, look at how high I flew." "Ah ha ha. I don't want it. Go throw him." Kong Kong's heart was filled with rejection. He wanted to escape, but he was caught by his father and lifted up. Then his laughter echoed in the air. Nuoi was naturally not let off by the fathers. Almost all the fathers carried him and played with him. Although Lu Yi did not come, his children were well taken care of by the warm-hearted fathers. However, Dejun was still in a deadlock with his father on the ridge of the field. He watched his friends play and listened to the laughter. He also wanted to have fun like his friends, but the fear of the muddy water in his heart still prevailed. Even if Lin Yongjian wanted to persuade him while he was looking over there, Dejun was unwilling to come down. Lin Yongjian felt helpless. He envied the other fathers in the same industry. They all had their super cute and obedient children. Seeing them having so much fun, Lin Yongjian's eyes couldn't help but reveal the light of desire. He also wanted to interact happily with his son in the quagmire. In fact, Dejun was a very kind child, but everyone had their own principles and things that they were afraid of. Dejun had misophobia, which was a natural psychological barrier. Lin Yongjian really couldn't rush in this aspect, and there was no need to have high expectations of Dejun. At this moment, the village chief came over because the next game had to continue. They could not let the program stop because of Dejun. The other children had been playing in the quagmire for quite a long time. They did not want to make the villagers wait for too long. Is this okay? The village chief was still very gentle as he coaxed Dejun, whose eyes were red and sobbing. If you are afraid, we won't continue, okay? When you are not afraid, you can tell me that we can go down. Then we will go down, okay? The village chief said to Dejun. Such gentle words calmed Dejun's emotions for a while. Of course, he was still unwilling to go down. Lin Yongjian's appearance at this moment made some of the audience feel sympathy. He had tried very hard, but he really couldn't persuade his son. His face was filled with helplessness, sadness, and conflict. Finally, it was time for the second game. The second game was to transport mud. The father and child stood at the starting point and dug up the mud in the quagmire to transport it to the destination bucket. Whoever transported the most mud in 3 minutes would win. Be careful, you have to take off your shirt. The village chief added with a smile. Take off my shirt? What's so nice about a body full of fat? Lin Yongjian laughed. At this time he didn't know why he had thought it through. He didn't argue with his son anymore. Instead, he used his unique sense of humor to participate in the show. Needless to say, with his interruption, the fathers all laughed. Who wasn't? They usually lived like princes and didn't participate in sports, let alone the gym. Although they didn't have beer bellies, their bellies were definitely not small. Of course, Poplar Fruit was an exception. But he was very low-key. It had been almost 3 years since she showed off on the stage of the Bali Fashion Week. Who could still remember her? Who is the first to go on the stage from our father's team? The village chief asked. To take off one's shirt. This was the first time in Where Are We Going, Dad? Several fathers expressed that they were a little shy. Thus, the Olympic champion Zhou Shimin was pushed out. His body should be good, right? The fathers guessed. Zhou Shimin pulled his son and walked to the starting point with difficulty. It was mainly because little chubby Xian was walking unsteadily. As he walked, he said to Xian worriedly, "Let me say this again, no matter who wins or loses, it's just a game. Don't cry, don't make a fuss, there's no winning or losing. It's just fun for everyone, okay?" Last time in Xishan, Xian showed a strong desire to win. When his father lost, he cried. Therefore, Zhou Shimin thought that this time, he had to give his son a warning in advance. He could not make trouble again. However, when they reached the starting line, Xian muttered with a sobbing tone, "Dad, I don't want you to lose." It seemed that he didn't listen to Zhou Shimin at all. All right, there was no other way. Zhou Shimin took off his shirt. It turned out that the boxing champion was also an ordinary person. The audience was greatly disappointed. Zhou Shimin was like an ordinary Chinese man. The flesh on his body was also loose. Of course, it couldn't be said that he was bad because Zhou Shimin didn't have much excess fat. His arms were still a little muscular. But he was definitely not as old as when he was still fighting in the Olympics. He was a 34-year-old veteran. Although he was still participating in professional boxing matches, the frequency of his matches and the intensity of his training had decreased a lot. Time had naturally left its mark on him. It couldn't be helped. Regardless, Zhou Shimin's muscles were still much stronger than Hu Jun and Lin Yongjian's. The competition began. The village chief's loudspeaker and hosting duties were snatched away by Sister Shirlu. Even the command was replaced by Sister Shirlyo's slightly hoarse middle-aged female voice. "Go Dad." Little chubby Xian performed very well. He cheered for his father loudly while helping his father pile mud. However, his chubby hands were too small and didn't have much use at all. Zhou Shimin said that to his son just now. However, when the competition really started, he worked very hard to compete and didn't care about his son. when Xian saw his father running towards the finish line. He also squeezed 2 small clumps of mud and ran after him shakily. In the end, after a little duan, little chubby Xian couldn't move his feet and fell into the mud. Chapter 1257. After all, he was an Olympic champion. Even though it was just a game, Zhou Shimin still showed a strong desire to win and fighting spirit. Thus, poor little Chuangshuan suffered. He fell in the middle of the quagmire and pitifully hoped that his father would help him up. In the end, Zhou Shimin stomped on the ground and flew through the mud without any intention of stopping. He rushed past his son, and even did a slide kick that could only be seen on a football field. Everyone was stunned. How was this regardless of whether he won or lost? He was risking his life. Not only that, but because Zhou Shimin was too brave, the mud splashed like bullets from a Gatling gun and swept towards little Chuangshuan. It didn't have much power, but it scared little Chuangshuan. The program crew was especially bad and used slow motion here. Little Chuangshuan's expression at that moment was shocked, disgusted, scared, puzzled, and uncomfortable. It was a mix of emotions that made people laugh until their stomachs cramped. Little Chuangshuan wanted to cry but had no tears. He wanted to hold up his long t-shirt to wipe his face, but he was splashed with mud. The t-shirt was even darker than his face. Go back quickly. Go back quickly. Sister Pomegranate couldn't help but laugh. She ordered Chuangshuan to go back and help his father. However, little Chuangshuan had difficulty moving and he was also lazy. Whenever he was in trouble, he would ask the adults for help. Thus, he cried and turned to the cameraman and begged, "Can you carry me back, please?" His small voice was soft and made people's hearts ache. However, the cameraman had no intention of helping. He had to rely on himself. However, although little Chuangshuan often relied on the adults and often threw tantrums, his personality was still good, and he could be strong on his own. As time passed, the game became more and more intense. Poplar Fruit and the other fathers and children were very involved. They shouted at the side and then gave advice as if they were experts. "Brother Zhou, don't be so anxious. Slow down and win with quantity. Move more at once." Poplar Fruit was so anxious that he kept jumping. "Go Chuangshuan. Go Chuangshuan." Kiki, as the captain of the small cheerleading team, led Kong Kong, Nuai, and Dejun on the ridge to cheer for their little friends. Dejun was indeed affected by the atmosphere and was very engrossed. However, he was still very vigilant in his heart. Even if he was affected, he was not willing to walk down the ridge. Instead, it was little chubby Xian who made everyone's eyes light up. Although he ran like a little flying pig, he had indeed abandoned his previous feelings of disdain and fear and started running with his father. Unfortunately, Zhou Shimin did not win in the end. Just as Poplar Fruit said, he rushed too fiercely and did not manage to transport much silt. However, Zhou Shimin did not feel that it was a pity. Instead, he was very happy because this time, little Fatty Xian did not kick up a fuss because he lost. He seemed to have forgotten about the competition. Of course, Kiki also played a part in this. After Xian came back, the little girl giggled in front of her friend and said, Xian, you ran so fast, and your papa is also very handsome." Kiki said that Zhou Shimin was handsome because of Zhou Shimin's sliding kick. It was a bit like diving, but it was very brave and fierce. At that time, several children on the sidelines screamed. Xian's sister's praise made him suddenly burst with happiness. He held his father's hand and smiled foolishly, even a little shy. However, his father's team did not have a big advantage in the field. The second person to go on the field, Hu Jun, also lost. Even though he lost, there was nothing to complain about. Although President Kong stood on the side and made funny faces at Sister Pomegranate and his friends and threw mud to tease the cameraman, he did not give his father any support. Although Hu Jun also worked very hard, the opponent treated him like those black aunties in Africa. He could still walk to the finish line with a high pile of silt on his head. He lost wholeheartedly. Next, who would be able to turn the tide? His father's team lost 2-0. In fact, Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry this time. Because they had already won the previous round, it was not bad to let the villagers win this round. In order to motivate his son, Lin Yongjian took off his shirt and volunteered to be the third runner. Dejun, your father is going on the field. Do you want to go and help your father? The village chief tried to persuade Dejun. However, the psychological problem of mysophobia was not something that could be overcome in a short period of time. Dejun shook his head and refused. The smile that had appeared on his face just now was immediately wiped away. The village chief could only give up. He went to ask Nuai if he was willing to help Dejun's father. That's okay. Nuai grabbed the village chief's arm and answered enthusiastically. However, when he spoke, it felt like his eyes were drifting and he did not look at the person he was talking to. Lin Yongjian stood at the finish line and looked at his son helplessly. Without glasses, his originally small eyes were squinted into slits. This gave people a faint feeling of melancholy. The program crew's camera accurately captured this scene. Nuai went over to help. He helped very seriously and enthusiastically. He fell a few times, but he still climbed up shakily and followed Lin Yongjian to stuff the mud into his trouser pocket. Wait, I still have some. Nuai was so anxious that it was as if he was the main character of the competition. Lin Yongjian worked very hard and packed a lot. He ran very quickly, but his trousers were not very strong. The heavy mud in his trouser pocket was about to fall off. Teacher Lin, trousers. Trousers. The fathers on the sidelines were convulsing with laughter. Even Sister Pomegranate could not help but laugh and remind him. Trousers will fall off, be careful. But how could Lin Yongjian care about his trousers? He tried his best to stuff mud, and even used a hat to cover his head. With one hand protecting his head and the other hugging a ball of mud. He could not care about his trousers as he ran. Seeing that his trousers were half hidden, the audience was sweating for Lin Yongjian, afraid that they would really fall off. The main thing was that if Lin Yongjian fell off, there would be nothing to see. Otherwise, if it was poplar fruit, many of the audience would probably be shouting, "Fall off, fall off." By the sidelines, the two fathers in front had turned into mud figurines. Their bodies and faces were black, as if they were soldiers who had applied camouflage paint to go into battle. The attentive Hujun noticed Dejun beside him, and deliberately played with him. They threw mud at each other, and Hujun even used his dirty hands to wipe Dejun's body. This time, Dejun did not cry and played with Hujun. He even laughed very happily. His laughter attracted Kiki's attention for a while. However, Dejun was still unwilling to come down. Kiki wanted to hold his good friend's hand to give him courage, but Dejun was very vigilant. Once the adults had such thoughts, he would shrink back. At this moment, Lin Yongjian finally completed the game. No one thought highly of him. After all, Lin Yongjian was a black hole in the game. However, he actually won. He really won. Lin Yongjian had defeated the villager team with an attitude of not caring about his trousers. Yay! The fathers and children all clapped and cheered. As for Lin Yongjian, it was rare for him to be so excited. Like a clay figurine, he stood beside the village chief and waved his arms. It was as if he had won a world boxing championship. He was arrogant and handsome. Chapter 1258. Lin Yongjian. Lin Yongjian. Lin Yongjian. Poplar Fruit was liking the guest lineup of the five fathers more and more. There weren't any particularly popular celebrities, nor were there any domineering authoritative figures. Although there was Lu Yi, who was a little eccentric, and there was Lin Yongjian, who was a more traditional middle-aged artist. Everyone had started working hard in obscurity, and had achieved results that were not considered bad. Their personalities were quite congenial. They were full of fatherly love when it came to educating their children, but they were not overly doting. They were willing to take care of each other and encourage each other during the show. They could be serious, but they could also be as crazy as they were now. After Lin Yongjian won, the three fathers shouted his name, as if he was a superstar. It made Lin Yongjian, who had a rare performance to turn the tide, shine brightly. If it was just one person fighting alone, even playing games would be very tiring. However, with everyone playing together, not only did the atmosphere improve, the entire scene became interesting and relaxed. Even the children were not willing to be left out, and shouted Lin Yongjian's name. They were rude, but the fathers did not blame them. Everyone was happy. Lin Yongjian's victory was not entirely his own glory. Dejun, who had lost control of his emotions, was now grinning happily. Perhaps he had some conflict with his father today, but Dejun was also proud of his father from the bottom of his heart. The father's team had lost 2 matches in a row and was in a slump. However, after Lin Yongjian turned the tide, there was a slight hope of victory. Alright, our next contestant is Poplar Fruit. The village chief laughed. He was now co-hosting with sister Shirlu. Kiki, who had experienced Dejun's father's inspirational victory, was very excited. She rubbed her fists and pulled her father forward. Wait a moment. Take off your shirt first. Just now, the fathers had already shown off their meat. They would not allow Poplar Fruit to have any special treatment. How could they let this kid escape? Laughing, Zhou Shimin ran up and hugged Poplar Fruit's hand. Hu Jun and Lin Yongjian pulled up Poplar Fruit's shirt, covering his head. It looked like Poplar Fruit was being bullied by these 3 big brothers. To be honest, if Poplar Fruit really wanted to resist, even 3 more people wouldn't be able to stop him. But Poplar Fruit didn't. He just laughed and shouted, "I'll take it off myself, I'll take it off myself." Then his 3 brothers, who were getting closer and closer to him, took off his shirt. "You're not allowed to bully my papa." Kiki anxiously circled around and kept slapping the thighs of the uncles. The little girl didn't understand for a moment and pouted angrily. The fierce little girl who was dedicated to protecting her father was very cute. Unfortunately, everyone's attention was on Poplar Fruit. Holy shit. What's that? Used to the white fat of the 3 fathers, everyone didn't have much hope for Poplar Fruit. Why did they say that? Because in the past 2 years, Poplar Fruit's academic achievements were indeed very dazzling. Not only did he have a doctorate and was currently on track to get a double doctorate, but not long before this episode was broadcast, there was also a news report that based on his previous academic contributions and the school's planning, Poplar Fruit was very likely to be promoted to an associate professor this year or next. This was amazing because Poplar Fruit would only be 28 years old next year. He was very young and very promising. But then again, people like doctors and professors were actually bookworms in everyone's eyes. Just like the several main actors in the US drama The Big Bang Theory, how could bookworms have good figures? But everything in front of them made all the audience dazzled. He looked thin in clothes, but he was muscular in clothes. And this was a very, very conservative evaluation. Pectoral muscles, abdominal muscles, Apollo's belt. Yang Guo had all the things a fitness expert should have. His muscles weren't bulging in an exaggerated manner, but each and every one of them looked extremely explosive, with clear cleavage, delicate and strong. Not everyone's muscles were good-looking. Westerners had big bone frames, so the thicker the muscles, the better they looked. For example, Schwarzenegger and the other older generation celebrities were famous for that. But Asians were different. We did not like that kind of image. For example, Bruce Lee was neither tall nor strong, but his muscles were very fine. Not only did he have super explosive strength, but he also fit the aesthetic standards of Asians. Compared to Bruce Lee, Poplar Fruit was much taller. His muscles did not look as dense. At the same time, he had both tension and explosive strength. Furthermore, his fat content was low. He looked very healthy and beautiful. To give a simple example, Poplar Fruit's muscles were more similar to Wang Qinyuan's, who had previously acted in Embroidery Spring Saber, and was about to act in a work with Lu Yi and Lu Dehua, Saving Mr. Me. Of course, Poplar Fruit was taller and more handsome. The scene of him stripping was retained by the program team. It was also a feast for the eyes of many of the audience. They could not rule out the possibility of some excited female audience members pausing to lick the screen. This was too fucking handsome. It was no wonder that Poplar Fruit was once called a supermodel among supermodels. With that body of muscles and that handsome and masculine figure. If not for Poplar Fruit's unwillingness, there would be many underwear manufacturers waving large sums of money to get him to endorse their products. It was really unexpected. Just like the audience, the program team and the other guests did not expect that Poplar Fruit, who had not shown much since the start of the program, would have such a good figure. Producer Xia, who was standing at the back, was shocked. He secretly sighed. This episode was definitely going to be popular. Ignoring everything else, Just the gimmick of Poplar Fruit showing off his figure was enough to raise the viewership ratings by a percentage point. Don't think that just because this was a parent-child program, there would not be any hype. With Mango TV's nature, this gimmick would definitely be cleverly used. Back in the program, the onlooking villagers all exclaimed. Almost everyone's eyes were firmly fixed on Poplar Fruit's good figure. Of course, the children were fine. They did not understand anything and were still making a fuss. The few fathers who made a move were all shocked by Poplar Fruit. They were stunned for a while. Zhou Shimin even gently patted Poplar Fruit's abdominal muscles and felt the vigorous strength. Poplar Fruit, how did you train? Zhou Shimin asked in surprise. When he was at his peak, he did not have such explosive muscles as Poplar Fruit. The audience burst out laughing. This scene was a little interesting. It gave people the feeling that Poplar Fruit's muscles could make men dizzy. Was Zhou Shimin gay? Some busybodies even tagged Zhou Shimin. Don't bully my papa. At this time, while the fathers were in a daze, the little girl finally found a gap and squeezed in. She angrily opened her arms and blocked in front of her father. My daughter is still the best. She knows how to care for her father. Chapter 1259. Poplar Fruit's current situation was very smug. He had a happy and proud smile on his face. He wasn't smug because his muscles were praised and amazed, but because of Kiki. He was smug because of his daughter. Kiki gave her father too much face. She was so small, and her arms didn't have much meat, but she wanted to stand in front of her father to protect him. She didn't have the ability, but her courage was commendable. Of course, this kind of smugness made people envious and jealous. The fathers who were originally amazed by Poplar Fruit's dazzling chest and abdominal muscles wanted to paste mud on Poplar Fruit's face. Too hateful. But who told their son to never love his father? Hu Jun didn't need to say anything. President Kong was born cold, and he couldn't say anything. Lin Yongjian didn't need to say anything. It was already good enough that De Jun didn't make things difficult for him. Zhou Shimin was still okay. Usually Xian also cared for his father. However, the premise was that there were no other beautiful sisters. Otherwise, his father would always be last in line. Of course, Hu Jun had a daughter. Jiao was already a big girl. When Hu Jun saw Kiki, he missed the time when his daughter was young. A daughter is a father's little lover. A daughter is a father's little cotton jacket. These words were not bad. Looking at Kiki and Poplar Fruit's intimate appearance, Lin Yongjian secretly sighed in his heart. If he had a choice, he wanted to have a daughter. Really, this was Lin Yongjian's heart. After playing for a while, Kiki understood that the uncles were just playing with her father. However, Chi-Chi was also very happy because she received a kiss from her father who was bursting with satisfaction. It was especially blissful when he kissed her forehead. Poplar Fruit, go. Kiki's father, go. The fathers and children on the sidelines kept shouting, especially Xian, who was shouting especially hard. Little chubby Xian looked very cute when he clenched his fist. Lin Yongjian, who had just won a big victory, unexpectedly received his son's love. Dajuan, who was especially afraid of getting dirty, was a little anxious when he saw his father's body and face all black. Although he didn't know what to say, he took a bottle of mineral water from the director beside him and carefully washed his father's face. Actually, De Jun wasn't that clean at this time. Just now he had a fight with Uncle Hu Jun. But seeing him use his small hands to wipe the mud off his father's face, the scene was somewhat touching. However, when the camera turned, the atmosphere in the middle of the bustling competition venue was no longer so oppressive. Even the calm Poplar Fruit was having a lot of fun with his daughter. Before they even started, he had already asked his daughter to help dig up mud and smear it all over his body. Kiki, quick, that's right. Apply some more here. The black mud covered his strong muscles, so it didn't look so shocking. It saved him from everyone looking at him uncontrollably, which made him feel a little uncomfortable. However, Yanggua's expression was very calm. He even used the mud to draw out the big tabby cat's whiskers on his face, making Chi-Chi giggle. Then Poplar Fruit also drew a mustache on his daughter's face. One big and one small, not serious, laughing and making funny faces at the camera. This was the best at acting cute. Okay, the competition was about to start. Poplar Fruit planned to compete seriously. After all, it wasn't easy for Teacher Lin to turn the tide just now. Poplar Fruit didn't want Teacher Lin's efforts to go to waste. Kiki, help Daddy dig the mud and pile it on Daddy's back. Poplar Fruit decided to use a strange posture to win. That was the camel position. Poplar Fruit directly went down on all fours like a camel. His right hand dug the mud and piled it on his back to ensure the quality of the transportation as much as possible. He didn't want to run around like Zhou Shimin. Poplar Fruit tried to make 1 or 2 trips, and then rely on himself to transport more mud to win. This posture was really not difficult for Poplar Fruit. Moreover, he could use his long arms to pile the mud on his back while ensuring the balance of his back. Of course, it would be even better if he had Chi-Chi's help. I'll help Daddy. Chi-Chi stroked her mustache and smiled coquettishly. She really was working very hard to help her father dig out the silt. Even though the originally beautiful little princess had become a downtrodden noble lady who fell into the mud along the way, she didn't care as much as she did just now. Stand up by yourself. Yes, quickly help Daddy. Poplar Fruit said to his daughter with a smile. I can do it. Chi-Chi clung onto her father's muddy thighs and stood up. She giggled as she stood up. No one knew how much she enjoyed completing missions with her father. She was as happy as the June sky, clear and boundless, with the sun shining brilliantly. It wasn't that there were no other situations. On the sidelines, Xian was fascinated by the scene and walked to the competition field. Fortunately, Zhou Shimin pulled him back and said, What are you doing? Are you going to find Sister again? Sister is in the competition. What was more interesting was the combination of Kiki and her daddy. The little girl did work hard, but the mud piled up near her daddy's shoulder. Moreover, she didn't pay attention to it, and the mud poured on top of her daddy's shoulder. As a result, Yanghua suffered. The muddy water flowed down his neck to his face. He had no choice but to use his hands to wipe it off. This made his already dirty face even darker. Okay, let's not load anymore. Let's carry it over first. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Kiki, let's see if you can walk faster or if Daddy can walk faster with his 4 legs. As a result, he saw Yanghua walking briskly and steadily like a pony, moving towards the finish line at a decent speed. Chi-Chi ran a few steps forward, then turned around and considerately supported her father. She said warmly, I'll hold Papa's hand. Come on. There's still more than a minute left. Hujun peeked at the village chief's watch and laughed. Poplar Fruit quickly asked Kiki to help lift the mud and throw it into the container. However, it was a pity that Kiki's hands were still too small. In the process of transferring the mud, she dropped a lot of mud. This strategy was very fun, but it didn't have much effect. It couldn't be compared to the 2 trips of the villager next to him to load more mud. Poplar Fruit looked at the containers on both sides and felt that he didn't have enough. I can't. I have to go all out. Ah! Poplar Fruit shouted. He hugged his daughter's waist and ran quickly through the mud to the finish line. Along the way, the mud splashed, and the cameraman who was taking pictures was also affected. However, Kiki liked the feeling of her daddy's speed. She was carried by her daddy like he was carrying a bag, and she giggled all the way. Looking at Poplar Fruit's back and Kiki's happy smile, the audience liked the little girl even more. Although she was dirty, Kiki was born beautiful. No matter how dirty she was still the little princess who laughed in the wind. It's November. Xiaohan begs for monthly votes for support. Chapter 1260. Time. The fathers were counting down while loudly reminding Poplar Fruit. The children were also immersed in the lively atmosphere. Some were cheering, while others were screaming excitedly. Nuai, for example, was waving his arms like a duckling. He was a little carried away. Poplar Fruit abandoned the fun but unreliable hump tactic. He scooped up the mud and put it on his head. Like the villager who defeated Hujun, he also let Kiki help him stuff the mud into his trouser pocket. Although the little girl's efficiency was very low, he would put in as much as he could. 20 seconds left. Kiki, let's go. Poplar Fruit shouted and ran towards the finish line with his long legs, leaving his daughter behind. Ha 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 ha. At first, Chi-Chi screamed when half of her body was flung by the mud that her father had stepped on. But fortunately, she felt that it was more fun than shock. After a pause, she chased after her father with a grin on her face. Poplar Fruit first put the mud piled high on his head into the container. Then he took out the mud in his trouser pocket and threw it into the container. This was his final result. Although he was still desperately searching for mud on his body, it was definitely very little. However, Poplar Fruit looked at the gap between himself and his opponent. It was actually more than 2 pounds. With only 4 seconds left, even if Poplar Fruit was a god, there was no way he could reverse the situation. Papa, Papa. The happy little girl finally reached her father's side. She reached out and held her father's thigh to steady herself. Then, she raised her little face that looked like a beggar princess and smiled at her father. Can't win? Poplar Fruit's eyes turned and looked at his daughter with a smile. Kiki was puzzled. Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of a good idea. Poplar Fruit suddenly bent down, carried his daughter by her waist, and carefully put her into the container. That's right, Kiki was carried into the container by her father. The little girl didn't react for a moment. She carefully stood up, and then straightened her body. Only Kiki was skinny. If it was little fatty Xian, he might not even be able to fit in. I have a clay doll. Poplar Fruit justified himself, then laughed and raised his hand cheering, we won. Kiki immediately understood. She played with the corner of her clothes embarrassedly and giggled with her father. Poplar Fruit's antics had disrupted the entire game, but everyone liked his performance. Whether it was the villagers, the parents, the children, or the production crew, they all laughed. Variety shows had to be like this. There was no point in following the rules. Sometimes you had to be a little shameless to stand out. Of course, after playing around, Poplar Fruit didn't continue to cheat. He smiled and admitted that he had indeed lost. She's 23 or 24 kilograms. Minus this number, we still lost. Yanghua openly and frankly revealed her daughter's weight. Our villager friend is still the best. Chi-Chi and I can't catch up to him even if we flatter ourselves. Papa, Papa. Save me. Kiki had completed her task. But when she saw her father chatting with the village chief and the villagers, leaving her in the tall container, the little girl called out pitifully. Yanghua smiled and carried her daughter down, letting her go and play with her friends. However, the Quagmire War was over by this time. In the second game, her father's team lost the game 1-3. They lost convincingly. Although it was still early and the father and the children hadn't played to their heart's content, their bodies were still muddy. It was time to go back and take a bath. The children's physical resistance wasn't like that of adults. It was fine to soak in the quagmire for a while, but if they played for a long time, they might get sick. After all, there were still bacteria in the quagmire. Come, wash your feet first. Otherwise, the road will be full of muddy footprints later. It was just washing their feet, but the children loved the feeling of playing with water. Nuoi and Kiki kept splashing water at each other, laughing and joking. Later, Xian and Dejun also joined in. Just now in the quagmire he couldn't join in. Dejun looked at his friends playing so happily, and he was very envious. Along the way, the other fathers and children chatted happily, especially the children. They chattered and shared their happiness with their fathers, and ran to hold their friends' hands and whispered. On the other hand, Lin Yongjian and Dejun were walking in silence. Perhaps sensing his father's unhappiness, Dejun pouted and lowered his head as he walked in a sullen manner. Others couldn't intervene in this matter, and they couldn't say who was right and who was wrong. Was Dejun wrong? He wasn't wrong. Mysophobia was a psychological problem, just like how a person who was afraid of heights would rather die than look down from a high place. Dejun, a Virgo, made him dirty. It was no different from killing him. But he wasn't right either, because he had indeed hurt his father's heart. And to him, it was no doubt a pity that he couldn't share this happy quagmire time with his good friends. Dad and the children go back to take a bath first, and then we'll gather here later. The village chief instructed. What about Nuai and Nina? Poplar Fruit asked. Why don't I help them? Nina was quite clean, but Nuai had indeed become a mud doll. The two children didn't have their father by their side, and looking at their brother and sister enviously, It was really pitiful. It's okay, I'll do it. Sister Pomegranate took on the responsibility of taking care of the two children. Back in his room, Poplar Fruit picked a few clothes, and then brought his daughter to the bathroom next door. During this period of time, they didn't have to worry about photographers following them. Did you have fun this afternoon? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile as he sprayed warm water on his daughter's head, face, and body to wash the mud off. Of course, he also took a shower himself. Min Province was considered a place that didn't lack water, unlike the previous trip where they had to be very frugal with the water used for bathing. Yes. The little girl's laughter was constantly interrupted by the water dripping down from her head. Close your eyes. Dad will wash your hair for you. Poplar Fruit used the shampoo he brought to wash Kiki's hair. Kiki's hair was very good, but it still needed to be maintained. In this regard, Fong Bei had given Poplar Fruit a lot of inspiration. In the past, Poplar Fruit stupidly thought that shampoo and conditioner were the same thing. After washing clean and smelling good, the little girl finally got rid of her image of a mud doll. Look at her little face. Her skin was so delicate that it looked like it could be broken by blowing on it. She had just taken a bath, so it was moist and very enviable. She changed into a pretty and cute little dress. Our most beautiful little princess is finally back. Chapter 1261. The dinner was very grand and sumptuous. There was a big circle around the table. The fathers and children, the program team's village chief and sister Shirlu, as well as the villagers of Spring Noble House, all sat together and had a lively meal. Lin Yongjian spoke on behalf of the fathers. Perhaps because he worked in the government all year round, he was the deputy cadre of the army drama troupe, so he spoke with a bureaucratic tone. However, Lin Yongjian spoke with some standard. The first part of his speech was somewhat empty, but the last part was very sincere. He used a metaphor to win the villagers' hearts. I wish all the villagers good health and a happy family, just like our house, full of happiness. Poplar Fruit took a small sip of wine, and then he was stopped by Kiki. The little girl pouted, shook her head and said, I don't want Papa to drink. Drinking is bad for your health. Actually, this was what Yang Guo had said to her father in the past when she advised him to drink less. Yang Tai was old and his health was good, but he had a problem, which was that he had to drink some white wine every meal. At first, Poplar Fruit would bring a few boxes of good wine for his father when he went home. Later, his sister said that the old man had fatty liver, so Poplar Fruit didn't bring any more. During the holidays, when he chatted with his father at home, Poplar Fruit would persuade him to drink less or stop drinking. The little girl sometimes sat next to him and listened. She also understood the harm of drinking. Now seeing that her father was drinking, although it was only beer, she still anxiously dissuaded her father. Yes, Papa doesn't drink. Listen to our Kiki. Poplar Fruit put down the bowl of wine with a smile. At this moment, Kiki smiled with satisfaction and then ate her dinner with relish. In the past, Poplar Fruit used to feed her. Now that Kiki had grown up, she learned how to use chopsticks by herself, and even learned to take care of her younger brother and sister. Yesterday, Lin Yongjian didn't see the Poplar Fruit, but tonight, he saw Kiki take the initiative to feed Nina. Although Nina was still taken care of by Sister Pomegranate in the end, Poplar Fruit felt very gratified. It couldn't be said that Kiki had learned anything through this program, but this program had shown Kiki's kindness and love of taking care of others. How is it? Is it delicious? Poplar Fruit saw that his daughter's chopsticks didn't stop moving, so he helped her pick up some of her favorite dishes: sweet and sour ribs, lychee meat, and stewed tofu. Min cuisine was also one of the 8 major cuisines in China. It was different from Cantonese cuisine, but in terms of taste it still belonged to the southern cuisine. It was not spicy, most dishes were not spicy, which was quite in line with Kiki's preferences. Delicious. Kiki ate heartily. The little girl, who also had a strong interest in delicious food, didn't have time to talk to her father. Seeing her eating with her mouth full of oil, Poplar Fruit laughed happily. Speaking of which, Poplar Fruit felt that his daughter's body was quite interesting. She usually ate a lot, almost twice as much as her peers, but after eating so much, Kiki was still as slim as she was now. Previously, Fong Beibei was worried that there might be something wrong with her, so she even took the little girl to the hospital for a checkup. Of course, there was no problem. Kiki's body was in good shape. Poplar Fruit guessed that it might be that Kiki's internal energy was consumed more. It was the same for him. Usually, he would need to eat a lot of food to maintain his consumption. This made Fong Beibei jealous. You two big and small rice buckets, how can you not get fat no matter how much you eat? There was another little foodie at the scene. That was Xian Xian, who was sitting on the other side of Poplar Fruit. Little Xian Xian was gnawing on a big duck leg. He almost choked on it, but his face still had an intoxicated expression. It wasn't known if there was a tacit understanding between foodies, but the two little foodies looked at each other across the poplar fruit, and then smiled. Sister, I'll teach you Junyi. I just told my father. When Xian Xian saw his sister, he didn't care about eating anymore. He leaned on the table, and said to Kiki across the poplar fruit. Okay. Kiki was also in high spirits. You teach me Junyi. I'll teach you. What should she teach Xian Xian? She knew a few foreign languages, but now it was a difficult choice. You teach brother Xian Xian Cantonese. Poplar Fruit laughed. Yes, I can teach you Cantonese, hee. Kiki said. I want to learn too. Sitting next to Kiki, Nui was also in high spirits. Just now he had chatted with Kiki while eating. The friendship between good friends was getting closer and closer. Okay, I'll give you my seat. Poplar Fruit's arm was pressed down by Xian Xian. In order to let the three children sit together and talk, Poplar Fruit could only smile bitterly at Zhou Shimin and shake his head, giving up his seat to them. Fortunately, the children were almost done eating and did not need to be taken care of anymore. Poplar Fruit changed seats and ate while chatting with Zhou Shimin. The two adults had a wide range of topics to talk about. This time, Zhou Shimin was interested in asking about Poplar Fruit's teaching experience in university. Poplar Fruit told him a few interesting stories about teaching students. However, the focus of the program was not on the content of their conversation, but on the children. In Junyi, do you know what delicious means? Xian Xian asked. He wanted to test sister Kiki and brother Nui. Unfortunately, Junyi's pronunciation was not too far away from Mandarin. Hao Chi made the two children immediately understand. I know. Kiki giggled. She raised her right hand and said, it means delicious. It's easy to guess. Grand Hero Addict. Nui swung his arms and imitated him. Hao Chi. Kiki also shook her head and waved her arm. She was not serious like Nui. Xian Xian was slightly more depressed. He felt that his words were too easy to learn, and scratched his head in distress. It's my turn. Kiki giggled and said, I'll teach you Cantonese. It's the same as Xian Xian monkey sek. When Kiki's pure Cantonese pronunciation came out, the audience began to react. This girl was also from Cantonese province. However, her and Poplar Fruit's Mandarin was very standard. It was a bit like a broadcaster's standard. It was not like people with a Cantonese accent, such as Sister Shirlu, who could not distinguish between the front and back. Therefore, if people did not look carefully, they would not know that they were from Cantonese province. How? Xian Xian and Nui were confused. Cantonese pronunciation was much more pronounced than Mandarin. For people who were not from Cantonese province, it was not easy to learn Cantonese. This time, Xian Xian and Nui did not pronounce correctly. It's not hu. It's sek. Kiki was amused by her two children. She giggled and corrected them. How sek? It had to be said that these young children's language talent was not bad. After Kiki repeated it a few times, Xian Xian and Nui could speak a little better. Chapter 1262. As the children learned, Sister Shirlu, who was originally a Cantonese speaker, joined in as well. This made her even more enthusiastic. De Jun, who had quarreled with his father earlier, also learned from them. Slowly he regained his smile and started to play with his friends. Of course, Mr. Kong was still a little cold. He curled his lips and didn't walk over. However, he still listened attentively. His eyes drifted over from time to time. Deep in his heart, Kong still wanted to play with his good friends. It was just that his friends were too young. When they laughed and played, they were too unrestrained. Mr. Kong, who felt that he had grown up, felt a little embarrassed to join in. After playing for a while, Kiki suddenly jumped out of their topic. She looked at Sister Pomegranate's face in a daze. She remembered what her father said at noon. Suddenly, she couldn't laugh and looked a little depressed. The little girl could be said to be the atmosphere metronome among this group of friends. The joyous and lively atmosphere just now was stirred up by Chi-Chi's laughter that sounded like silver bells. At this moment, she was suddenly unhappy. The atmosphere was like a car's wheels that were spinning fast and suddenly stepped on the brakes. Dejun smiled and shook Kiki's little hand. As a result, he turned his head and saw his good friend frowning sadly. Dejun was stunned. He turned his head, but then turned back to look at his sister with a puzzled expression. Sister Pomegranate also felt it. She looked down at the kind and lovely little girl. Her big hand was still on Kiki's little shoulder. She asked warmly, "What's wrong?" "Sister Pomegranate, my father said at noon that you were going back tonight, right?" Kiki pursed her lips and asked unhappily. Sister Pomegranate was stunned for a moment and said frankly, "Yes." It could be seen that the children who had been chatting happily all became a little confused. Dejun was the oldest and was the first to react. He asked, "Go back where?" "Go back to Harbor City," Sister Pomegranate said. This sentence made Mr. Kong, who was originally a little absent-minded, suddenly wake up. He turned his head to look at Sister Pomegranate, as if he still couldn't believe his ears. Then, "Sister Pomegranate, are you going back?" Xian scratched his head and said, "Yes, Wanwan has to leave today. Her flight will be at 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow," Sister Shirlu said with a smile. Although she was smiling, it was just an adult's reluctance to leave. "Sister Shirlu, I don't want you to leave," Dejun said sadly. "I don't want you to leave either." Kiki, Xian, and Nui all agreed. The children's eyes were filled with tears. Kong was the same. Although he didn't come over, he had been listening. The little boy pursed his lips, but he hid the sadness in his heart and pretended not to care. He said loudly, "Why are you leaving so quickly?" "We're not going home until tomorrow, because Sister Shirlu has a job in Hong Kong tomorrow," Sister Pomegranate said with a smile. She could actually feel the attachment and love that the children had for her. Her eyes were a little red. "Sister Pomegranate, I'll miss you." Kiki knew from her father that Sister Pomegranate's departure was inevitable. She sobbed softly and ran to Sister Pomegranate's side. She hugged Sister Pomegranate and threw herself into her arms. At this time, Nina still didn't understand. It wasn't that she was young and didn't understand the sadness of parting. It was that she hadn't realized that other than her father, mother, and brother, there were other people who were not related by blood who were worthy of her nostalgia. The growth of a person was also a process of broadening their horizons. When we were young, we thought that the world was only as big as our home. Slowly, we realized that there were other houses besides our home. Slowly, we realized that there were other cities besides our hometown. Slowly, we realized that there were other countries besides our country. Even the Earth, the solar system, and the stars. These all needed to be slowly grown up. However, the other children already had this kind of understanding. Perhaps Xian was still a little behind, but under the influence of Kiki, the other children all went over to hug Sister Pomegranate and cried. Sister Pomegranate was a little caught off guard. The softness in the depths of her heart seemed to have been gently bumped by the 4 children surrounding her. She, who had never had a child of her own, felt as if she was a mother. That was the child's deep dependence on her. It was the most sincere love in the world. Tears were already welling up in her eyes. However, Sister Pomegranate was Sister Pomegranate after all. She was a woman who had experienced the death of her lover, and had been single for many years. She was a woman who was good at hiding her emotions. She was a woman who walked freely in this world. She rubbed the little heads of the 4 children and smiled. "Okay. You're all about to squash me. Sister Pomegranate, you haven't eaten dinner, right?" Kong suddenly called out. The little boy didn't want to show his weakness in front of so many people, so he spoke in a rough voice. However, the audience could see his sadness. "I don't want to eat dinner tonight. I want to drink." Sister Pomegranate liked Kong Kong very much. Although Kong Kong lost his temper because of her at the beginning, as the adults played with the children, their feelings for each other grew deeper. Hence, Sister Pomegranate went along with Kong Kong and deliberately made a scene. Someone come, pour the wine for Sister Pomegranate. Kong Kong was now like a big boss, waving his hand and shouting, I'll pour the wine for Sister Pomegranate. Xianxian's voice was childish, but it was filled with strength. I'll do it too, I'll do it too. The atmosphere began to change. Originally, it was still a little depressed. Now, because of the children's enthusiasm and Kong Kong's jesting, the few children all laughed. At this time, Kiki wiped away her tears. She was still leaning in Sister Pomegranate's arms and laughing. The little girl stretched out her small arms and covered Sister Pomegranate's mouth. She said in a sweet voice, Sister Pomegranate, don't drink. Drinking is bad for your health. The children happily exchanged feelings with Sister Pomegranate. The fathers all looked at them with a smile on their faces. They didn't say anything because they were afraid that they would break the warm scene in front of them. They just let the children play with Sister Pomegranate. Who asked Sister Pomegranate to be so popular with the children? In front of everyone, Kong Kong didn't show anything. But when night came, the other children, including Kiki, had already returned to their rooms. Under the company of their fathers, they were packing their luggage and preparing to go to bed. Only Kong Kong was still thinking about Sister Pomegranate's matter. Sister Pomegranate and Kong Kong finally chatted at the entrance of the earthen building for a long time. Only then did the adults and children reluctantly say goodbye. Kong Kong's eyes were red, but he held back his tears. He waited until he returned to his bedroom and fell into his father's arms. Children, feelings are the most real. And they won't lie. When she left, Sister Pomegranate's eyes were actually filled with tears, but she also held it back. She waved her hand coolly, got into the car, and left the earthen building where she left precious memories. It's okay. It's always hard to part with each other. There will be times when we meet again. The future won't be in the show, but we can still meet again in real life and continue to be good friends. Chapter 1263. The second trip was finally over. Poplar Fruit and his daughter were on their way home. Of course, Kiki still wanted to continue. When they parted, not only did she want to say goodbye, she even wanted to invite her friends over to her house to play. Of course, this idea could not be fulfilled. After all, every child had a mother who missed them at home. Nina and Nuai were the same. Lu Yi was already looking forward to it at home. Tonight, the two of them would definitely be able to see their parents when they returned home. All right then. See you next time. I'll miss you so much. Princess Kiki warmly said goodbye to her friends one by one before leaving with her father to take the high-speed rail home. Mama, look. This is the present I brought for you. Kiki also missed home. The moment she returned, she hugged Feng Beibei intimately and kissed her left and right. Poplar Fruit could not find an opportunity to be intimate with his girlfriend who he missed so much after not seeing for a few days. Therefore, Poplar Fruit could only hug the silly and growing Goldie for warmth. Wow, what's this? Feng Beibei was surprised and amused when she saw Kiki take out a puppet from the box. It was dressed in ancient costume. Of course, she had seen it before. This is a puppet. Kiki giggled as she put in her little gloves. The little girl who had played with it many times in the morning easily controlled the puppet to move its arms. Before we left Nanjing this morning, we learned how to play puppets from our fellow villagers. Poplar Fruit saw that his daughter was immersed in playing. He smiled and explained to Feng Beibei. Then we even made up a puppet show. Kiki liked this puppet very much. It was mainly because they had performed the Pleasant Goat version of the Three Little Pigs. Kiki's Pleasant Goat character successfully protected the village and her friends, defeating 2 gray wolves. Later, Poplar Fruit discussed with the production crew and bought the puppet for his daughter to bring home as a souvenir. Mama, let me show you. Kiki held the puppet and danced with joy, happily showing it to Feng Beibei. This time, after returning from Nanjing, Yanghua felt that her daughter was more open than the last time. She wasn't as reserved as before. She wasn't sure if it was because she had become good friends with Nuai, But the little girl's thoughts and actions were a little more jumpy. This wasn't a bad thing, because Kiki used to be under her father's protection. Although she was cute, she would lose her personality if she was too docile. Ever since Kiki went to kindergarten, she had changed a little. She was willing to take the initiative to make friends, but she was still a little lacking. This time, where her father went was a good opportunity, because other than Kiki, the other 4 children were 1 in 1,000. Poplar Fruit rarely saw so many different but positive children. If Kiki could make friends with them, play together, and learn from each other, it was definitely a good thing. Of course, he thought so highly of these 4 children. Didn't the other 4 fathers like Chi-Chi very much too? In the past, when they heard that Poplar Fruit would bring his daughter on stage, the fathers secretly wondered if they would meet a girl with a bad temper. Because Kiki was considered a child of a single parent, if the family was not complete, the child would be greatly affected. In the entertainment industry, there were many children of single parents with weird personalities. But they did not expect that Kiki would be so popular with everyone. Yes, Kiki was a princess. Wherever she went, she would be treated like a princess. But Kiki was a good princess without a princess's temper. She was obedient, cute, kind, and innocent. How could such a child not be liked by everyone? Speaking of her father, the little girl was born in a scholarly family. Not only was she well educated, but she was also very gentle and considerate to strangers and friends. She was the little cotton-padded jacket that every father longed to have. Where You Go, Dad was a program that witnessed the relationship between fathers and children during their travels. It was also a program that witnessed the growth of children during their travels. Poplar Fruit was looking forward to it. He hoped to see his daughter's qualitative leap. It wasn't easy to pacify the noisy little girl. After taking a shower and sleeping, Yonghua finally had the chance to chat with his girlfriend quietly for a while. It was strange. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei had not registered their marriage, but the 2 of them had lived together for a few years. Then, like an old couple, their pace of life was slow, warm, and loving. Although it was true that they lacked the passion that young people often had, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were not the kind of people who pursued passion. They enjoyed a slow pace of life, a state where they knew each other well, and an ordinary life of daily necessities. Of course, it could not be said that they lacked romance. Because sometimes, when Poplar Fruit went home, he would drive past a flower shop and bring a bouquet of Fong Beibei's favorite jasmine flowers. Sometimes, Poplar Fruit would send Kiki to stay with her grandparents for 2 days. Then, the young couple would prepare some warm and romantic programs such as a candlelight dinner. There was also travel. As long as it was not a conflict of work or Fong Beibei's studies, Poplar Fruit would take her and Kiki to travel a few times a year. Sometimes it was in China, but more often it was abroad. While they were young, they wanted to travel more and see the world. Their love was written all over the trip. In fact, Poplar Fruit had only been out for 2 or 3 days. The things that they talked about were trivial things that happened in the past few days. They talked about Kiki's phone call that night. Poplar Fruit knew that if Fong Beibei had not comforted the little girl on the phone, he might have only seen the little girl curled up in bed crying when he came back at night. "Thank you, baby." Poplar Fruit hugged his girlfriend and gently kissed her forehead. "What are you thanking me for?" Fong Beibei turned over with a smile and pinched Poplar Fruit's face. She pouted and said, "Don't treat a stepmother like a godmother. It doesn't rhyme." Poplar Fruit laughed and joked. "Let me teach you. You should say it like this. Don't treat a stepmother like an old godmother. You're the old godmother, you're the old one." Fong Beibei clenched her fist and hammered Poplar Fruit, asking him to talk nonsense. From Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit also knew that the dean, Chen Zhongdai, had looked for him in the past few days. It seemed that there was something urgent, so Poplar Fruit planned to go back to school tomorrow to see his teacher. Now, although Poplar Fruit had graduated from Chen Zhongdai and received his doctorate certificate, once a teacher, always a teacher, Poplar Fruit still liked to call him teacher instead of dean. The day after tomorrow, he had to accompany Fong Beibei to take graduation photos, either as a photographer or as a human background. Of course, the main characters were Fong Beibei's former roommates, a few of her close friends. Chapter 1264. The next day, Poplar Fruit went to the school and knocked on the door of his teacher's office. "You're back?" asked Chen Zongdai as he put down the book in his hand and took off his glasses. "I'm back. Teacher, are you looking for me?" asked Poplar Fruit with a smile. Poplar Fruit poured a cup of hot water for the old man and sat down. Chen Zongdai did not plan to talk about the matter directly. Instead, he asked, "How are the preparations for your graduation ceremony going?" The graduation ceremony he was talking about was obviously not Poplar Fruit's graduation ceremony. He would not get his PhD until next year. "It's all ready." Poplar Fruit smiled gratefully and said, "But I still have to thank you, teacher. I don't have enough face to let our school and the mathematics department hold a graduation ceremony together." Generally speaking, the graduation ceremony of the foreign language department was held together with the Chinese department. However, this year, because Poplar Fruit wanted to make some noise, Chen Zongdai also used his connections to help Poplar Fruit. He did not expect the school to agree. "You fought for this yourself. It has nothing to do with me." Chen Zongdai was actually in a good mood. He smiled and waved his hand. He did not laugh at Poplar Fruit like before. He did not go into too much detail. In fact, it was exactly the case. If Poplar Fruit was not the leader of the new generation of linguistics, if Poplar Fruit did not get so many honors and achievements in just a few years, if Poplar Fruit did not give up the invitation to Harvard University and stay at Higashiyama University to continue his studies and teaching, the school would not have let him go. Poplar Fruit's request was not easy. It was a move that subverted the school's tradition. There was no precedent in the history of Higashiyama University. "Okay, let's not talk about this later." Chen Zongdai finally got down to business with Poplar Fruit. "Do you know about One Belt, One Road?" Chen Zongdai asked seriously. Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He nodded and said, "I know, the TV news broadcasts it every day. The Belt and Road Initiative's English name is the Silk Road Economic Belt." Before Poplar Fruit could finish, he was interrupted by Chen Zongdai. He smiled and said, "Okay, you brat. You only know how to mess with me. Am I asking you for its English name?" Poplar Fruit chuckled. He was indeed mischievous earlier and said, "Teacher, if you have something to say, just say it. You also know that I have a good memory. How could I not know about the Belt and Road Network?" Chen Zongdai nodded and said, "The implementation of the Belt and Road Network policy is destined to have a large talent shortage in our country in the future. We don't care about economic talents, but for our foreign language school, the country needs a lot of talents from Southeast Asia, East Asia, Europe, and other places. This is our shortcoming, but it is also our opportunity." Poplar Fruit also restrained the smile on his face at this time. He sat upright and looked at his teacher, listening carefully. "Our school doesn't have many foreign language talents. I told you before, not to mention the competition on a national scale. Even Lingnan and South China can't be regarded as a foreign language talent training base," Chen Zongdai said with some regret. "But this time, we still caught up with a good time." Chen Zongdai said happily, "The Belt and Road Network policy is a rare development opportunity for us. The country has special funds to support it, and the school is also preparing to increase the number of specially recruited students to support the development of our school. From the beginning of the next school year, our school will add a new department." Finally, he got to the point. Chen Zongdai knocked on the table and said, "It's called the Eurasian Language Department. It will set up Nanyue, Burmese, Thai, Turkish, Hindi, Hebrew, Persian, Romanian, Hungarian, Bulgarian, and so on." "So many?" Poplar Fruit looked at the information handed over by Chen Zongdai. He looked at his teacher in surprise and asked, "Can we recruit so many teachers?" Although he did master more than 90% of the languages on the list, Poplar Fruit was not Superman. There was no way he could teach so many students. "Yes, we can." Chen Zongdai smiled and said, "In fact, since last year, the school has been in contact with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and teachers from other schools. We didn't poach people, but we did recruit a lot of foreign language talents who have been developing abroad for many years and are looking forward to a stable life back in China. So next semester, we will have at least 26 new teachers of minor languages. At least 1 or 2 teachers for each major. Chun Zongdai talked about his plan. These unpopular minor languages, of course, can't be taught according to the usual teaching model. It turned out that the school's plan for the Eurasian language department was not a direct enrollment major. The school would expand the enrollment of the English department to fill the talent gap in the outer court. Then the outer court had a tradition of double majors, which meant that English language students would also study another language. The Eurasian language department came into play at this time. They would exist as auxiliary subjects, and students could choose to study an unpopular language as their second major. This way, the competitive advantage after graduation would be much greater. Different from the previous minor languages, the choice of unpopular languages is better without than with substandard ones. Each class will have 3 to 10 people. With a mentor system, the number of people can be reduced, and the teachers can be more targeted. Chun Zongdai smiled and said, "This was also a suggestion you made last year." Indeed, after Poplar Fruit taught Swedish for a year last year, he had such an idea. Unpopular languages did indeed need a mentor system. Not everyone had an extraordinary memory like him. If the teacher did not make a targeted learning plan for a student, the learning of an unpopular language would be very, very difficult. Just think about it, and you can understand the reason. When we learn English, we start building the foundation from primary school, or even when we are born. In the end, we learn until we are in our 20s, and the challenge of learning an unpopular language is even greater. If you want to master a new language and become proficient in it in 4 years, you need to invest a lot of energy and hard work. Then, teacher, what do you need me to do? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. Opening a new department and adding more than a dozen unpopular language majors, this is not a small matter. This is probably the biggest move the School of Foreign Languages has made in the new century. Poplar Fruit was very confused about his position. Teaching was not bad, but since Chun Zongdai called him over, he must be entrusted with an important task. "I need you to be the head of this department," Chun Zongdai said surprisingly. "Head of department?" Poplar Fruit was stunned. He waved his hand and said, No, how can this be?" Poplar Fruit was only 27 years old. Moreover, he had just graduated with a doctorate last year. He had only been a lecturer for 2 years. What qualifications did Poplar Fruit have to take up such an important position as the head of a department? Although it was only an administrative position, it was only under the leadership of the School of Foreign Languages. Chapter 1265. Why not? Chun Zongdai asked even though he already knew the answer. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and said, "Teacher, aren't you roasting me on a fire? The vice dean of the English department used to be my undergraduate teacher. He's already so old, yet he's still only a vice dean. I've only been a teacher for a few years, yet I'm already the dean. Won't I be scolded?" Chun Zongdai said calmly, "Other than qualifications, what else do you think you can't be the dean of this department? Talent? Ability? Or are you unwilling to do it?" Poplar Fruit choked. He couldn't say anything. You know, this Eurasian department is the first in our school. There's no preparation at all. There's no experience to learn from. We just recruited teachers from outside. Chun Zongdai said, "Are we going to let a teacher from another school, or someone who has never been a teacher, come in and be the dean of this department? That's impossible. If there were other choices, any school would choose their own direct descendant to sit in this position at this time. It's not a matter of being xenophobic. It's just that the school has to choose their own people to manage for their own control. Or should I let an English teacher who knows nothing about unpopular languages be the dean of the Eurasian department?" Chun Zongdai asked. "That's also impossible. Crossing a line is like crossing a mountain. A science and engineering teacher can't manage a group of liberal arts teachers because they can't convince them in terms of professional ability. Similarly, an English teacher can't stand on the head of a teacher from another subject." In this way, Poplar Fruit found that he was really the most suitable person to be the dean of this department. If you don't have enough management ability, you can learn. Our school will also support you. Chun Zongdai analyzed to Poplar Fruit, "But your language ability is still outstanding. Only you know what they know, and they might not know what you know. Only then will you be able to control these external teachers academically. Poplar Fruit began to put aside his own prejudice and seriously think about what the teacher said. Other than management, you also have to be a good vanguard. Chen Zongdai continued. The Eurasian Language Department is not only a response to the call of the policy, but also an important opportunity for our school to rise in the language field. We need to seize this opportunity to cultivate a large number of foreign language talents. Chen Zongdai said solemnly. Only then can we establish our position in the foreign language world. Other than developing a few courses yourself, you also need to help other teachers sort out the teaching process. You even need to lend a helping hand when they need it. Chen Zongdai sighed and said, rapid expansion means that our foundation is not stable. Although the teachers we hired are capable, their teaching experience is far less than yours. Do you understand what I mean? Poplar Fruit nodded with a solemn expression. The school had found talents in unpopular languages from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Society. They did have a professional advantage in these unpopular languages, but most of them were still beginners in the field of teaching. Once they encountered any problems, except for Poplar Fruit, there was no one else they could turn to for help. Poplar Fruit's language ability was, of course, unquestionable. In the Xinda translation competition, he had the upper hand. It could be said that he was a self-taught genius, but he was still far better than those professionals who had studied and used professionally for decades. Chen Zongdai understood Poplar Fruit's strength, so he also regarded Poplar Fruit as his biggest trump card. In this huge plan of the Eurasian Language Department, Poplar Fruit was definitely the most important link. It could even be said that he was the center of all communication. So the school and the school need you. Chen Zongdai asked one last time and said, are you willing to take on this responsibility? Originally, Chen Zongdai thought that Poplar Fruit would want to reconsider, but he saw his proud disciple smile and say, since the teacher and the school trust me so much, of course I'm willing to take on this responsibility. He smiled confidently and spoke lightly, but his eyes were firm and steady. To be honest, Poplar Fruit had never underestimated his strength. He knew that he was not worse than anyone now, including his teacher. Poplar Fruit was also confident that he could beat Chen Zongdai in functional linguistics. However, Poplar Fruit also knew that China had never been a country that relied on strength to speak. It was the same in the ivory tower. Sometimes, ability could not be compared to seniority. Even if he published so many epic-making works, it was still the same. Yang Guo never dreamed of becoming a fish that leaped over the Dragon Gate overnight. That was unrealistic. Therefore, Poplar Fruit had been working hard step by step, waiting for the opportunity, or slowly building up his seniority. To him, he was still young and was not in a hurry. Besides, with Chen Zongdai, even if he could not break the rules, his speed of promotion was definitely the fastest in the tradition. This could be seen from the speed at which he obtained his doctorate. Although overseas with Poplar Fruit's talent, he could have been a professor, but Poplar Fruit felt that it was enough. His pursuit of fame and fortune was not that strong. However, this was fate. Even if Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry and Chen Zongdai was very satisfied, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity still came knocking on his door. And Poplar Fruit happened to be the one who was prepared early. Therefore, when the opportunity came, Poplar Fruit had no reason not to seize it. Okay. Take these materials back and read them. Chen Zongdai nodded with satisfaction. He handed over a huge hard drive and said, since you want to be the department head, you have to finish reading these materials before the meeting in August. Then give me a detailed report on the 5-year plan. In the first year, I need you to be meticulous to every teacher. Chen Zongdai set a lot of requirements, and Poplar Fruit seriously remembered them in his mind. Since he accepted the challenge, he would do his best to complete it. Therefore, even if Chen Zongdai gave him a unit of T-portable hard drive, Poplar Fruit was determined to finish it. In addition to this, you have another task. Chen Zongdai suddenly put on a strange smile, which made Poplar Fruit feel a little creeped out. If the old man smiled like this, it must be an extraordinary task. What is more difficult than being the department head? Teacher, don't keep me in suspense, just say it. Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile. Chen Zongdai took out a letter from the drawer and handed it to Poplar Fruit. He laughed and said, "Look at how scared you are. This is a good thing. Do you know that we have a military parade in September?" Poplar Fruit nodded stupidly and thought, "What does the military parade have to do with me, a little brat? They can't ask me to be a guest, right? The Ministry of Foreign Affairs wants you." Chen Zongdai pointed at Poplar Fruit and smiled brightly. Chapter 1266. Walking out of the teacher's office, Poplar Fruit felt that his footsteps were a little light. It was not the kind of light after being proud, but the kind of light after not daring to believe the reality. At noon, he had an appointment with Fong Beibei for lunch. Poplar Fruit could also take this opportunity to talk to his girlfriend, because the last news that the old man told him was too bizarre. "You said you want to go to the viewing platform?" Fong Beibei did not react at first. Suddenly, the hand that was holding the chopsticks trembled, and the piece of tofu that she was holding fell onto her clothes. She looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise. Poplar Fruit quickly took out a tissue from Fong Beibei's bag and helped her wipe it. Fortunately, the two of them were sitting in a remote corner of the cafeteria. Otherwise, such an intimate action would probably kill a lot of single dogs. Although the two of them were not cheap, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei still liked to stay in school at noon, like an ordinary student couple. After eating in the cafeteria, the two of them held hands and strolled around the school, or found a coffee shop to sit and read for a while. Today Fong Beibei was quite busy. She had to take graduation photos with her classmates, so she was still wearing the clothes of the Republic of China. "Quickly tell me, what's going on?" Fong Beibei pulled Poplar Fruit's hand. The girl's eyes were like a quiet lake, glittering and full of emotions. Poplar Fruit waved his hand and laughed. "It's your husband. I am too awesome, so the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came to ask for help." He would only be so casual in front of his girlfriend. Normally, he would not dare to brag like this. Fong Beibei's face was slightly red. She spat and then said angrily, "All right, stop running around. Do you think I don't know your weight?" Poplar Fruit laughed and then told his girlfriend in detail what was going on. It turned out that the country was going to hold a grand military parade in September. Leaders from all over the world would be invited to attend the ceremony. Then there was a small problem. Even if not all the countries came, and only a dozen or so countries showed up, it would still be a little troublesome to arrange for the translation. The following is purely Xiaohan's unreasonable fabrication. Readers can just laugh it off. Normally, it would be fine, but when they were on the viewing platform, and during the process of going up and down the viewing platform, the dozen or so interpreters couldn't possibly be following the leaders of the various countries, right? Looking at the live broadcast, there were national leaders, translators, and translators. Translators accounted for almost half of the audience. Wouldn't that be a little overwhelming? So they want to use a very small number of translators on this journey. The task is not very heavy, but if one of the leaders of dozens of countries comes up to talk to our leader, the translators have to do their job well. Otherwise, it would be a dereliction of duty, Poplar Fruit said. "So they thought of you?" Fong Beibei asked doubtfully. "No way. Could it be that in such a big Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they couldn't find a talent who can speak more than one language?" "There are, but they don't know all of them." Poplar Fruit spread out his hands and laughed. Most of the translators knew 2 or 3 languages, and there were a few geniuses like Poplar Fruit who knew more than a dozen languages. This was very normal. If there were no such geniuses in such a big country, it would be too bad. But there was still a certain gap between them and Poplar Fruit. That was because they could learn so many languages, mainly because they could master 1 or 2 language families. For example, those who knew Slavic languages could speak Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Bulgarian, Polish, and so on. Poplar Fruit also tried to learn 1 language in a language family, and it was easier for him to learn other languages of the same language family. Poplar Fruit's biggest advantage compared to them was that he was well-rounded. He could master most of the Indo-European languages, as well as the Altaic languages, Central Asian and East Asian languages. At the same time, he could master the Afro-Asian languages, Niger-Congo languages, and so on used in Africa, the Middle East, and other countries. There were not many big countries who were willing to participate in China's military parade. The ones who were truly willing to come were probably the African countries, the Central Asian countries in the One Belt and One Road that had good relations with China, and some countries in South America that had good relations with China. The list of countries participating in the parade was not complete, but from what was confirmed, it was indeed countries in this range. It was difficult for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to find a genius translator who could cover so many unpopular languages. Therefore, they thought of Poplar Fruit, who had a pleasant cooperation with them in Africa last year. Although a translator of Poplar Fruit's level did not receive any certification, it was still recorded in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was a record that was left with real ability. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs clearly recorded all the languages that Poplar Fruit mastered last year. A total of 38 languages. There were 4 new languages added this year, but they did not have time to record it. Therefore, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs planned to recruit Poplar Fruit to serve the country on this special occasion. Speaking of which, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs used to favor Poplar Fruit and wanted to recruit Poplar Fruit. If Poplar Fruit had agreed, he might have already been a diplomat stationed in a certain country. However, Poplar Fruit could not bear to leave his family, so he declined in the end. However, Poplar Fruit was still within the system. Higashiyama University, where he was under the Ministry of Education. In addition to his cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the two were still inextricably linked. It was normal to recruit an expert and scholar in the system to help at an important time. Therefore, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs did not hesitate to send a letter to Higashiyama University after making the decision. If it was a permanent recruitment, the Higashiyama University, which regarded Poplar Fruit as a treasure of the Higashiyama University for the next few decades, would definitely quarrel with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and not be willing to let him go. However, if it was a temporary recruitment, then it was a win-win situation. At that time, when Chen Zhongdai had analyzed the situation for Yang Guo, he had also mentioned a reason why the academy placed great importance on it. This line could be said to have written a thick and heavy mark on Poplar Fruit's file. It was very helpful for Poplar Fruit to smoothly take over the administrative position of the department head. Not only did he have more experience, but it also gave him the right to speak in front of other teachers. If being an interpreter in front of the country's leaders was not a capital, then what was? Also, the university and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs fought for a lot of benefits for Poplar Fruit. For example, Poplar Fruit had self-taught so many foreign languages in the past, but he did not have a certificate. In the eyes of many experts, he was just a nobody. For this line, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs would hold a separate assessment for Poplar Fruit. If he could get all the certificates in one go, then Poplar Fruit would be upgraded from a bird's gun to a cannon, jumping from a ragtag army to a regular army. No matter how one looked at it, Poplar Fruit should take this trip. So I have to go, even if I don't want to. Poplar Fruit smiled and spread out his hands. This is such an important matter. You dare not to go? Fong Beibei rolled her eyes at Poplar Fruit and laughed. If you don't go, won't your father chase you down with a hoe on the streets? Poplar Fruit's father, Yang Tai, was not a soldier, but he was definitely a patriotic youth. He usually only watched the news on TV, and only watched the military channel. Fong Beibei's words were not an exaggeration at all. Of course I'll go. How would I dare not to go? Poplar Fruit laughed and raised his hands in surrender. Chapter 1267. Poplar Fruit didn't plan to take graduation photos with Fong Beibei in the afternoon. After all, it was Fong Beibei's class. Although he was usually inseparable from his girlfriend, both of them left a certain amount of free space for each other. It wasn't good to always be together. Although his EQ wasn't high, Poplar Fruit, who had been in a relationship before, understood this point. However, obviously, Poplar Fruit underestimated his influence. Poplar Fruit used to be a celebrity. Although he wasn't the kind of celebrity that had fans screaming everywhere, he was also worshipped by his classmates in school. Now Poplar Fruit and Kiki were on a national program. Where are we going, Dad? It hadn't been broadcast yet, but it was already popular all over the country. Although Poplar Fruit didn't admit it, he was also a big celebrity in the entertainment industry. What if a celebrity came? Autographs, photos, and onlookers. Although Poplar Fruit often appeared on campus, it didn't reach the serious situation of onlookers, but everyone ran over from time to ask for autographs and photos. Fong Beibei's classmates didn't need to mention. With such a good resource around, how could they not make use of it? If he could take a graduation photo with a celebrity, how glorious would that be? So after hearing that Poplar Fruit came back, they instigated Fong Beibei to pull Poplar Fruit over. Fong Beibei had no choice but to have lunch with Poplar Fruit at noon. Then she called Poplar Fruit, who didn't have other important things in the afternoon. Poplar Fruit was okay. He didn't think of himself as a celebrity, so he didn't put on airs. He laughed and played with Fong Beibei's classmates. Not only did he not refuse to take photos with them, but he also treated them to a big meal in the evening. Poplar Fruit, who didn't put on airs, made Fong Beibei's classmates feel very friendly. This also made Fong Beibei feel very happy. This wasn't a matter of face. She didn't want her world to be too different from Poplar Fruit's. The graduation photo shoot lasted for 2 days. On the second day, Poplar Fruit asked for leave from kindergarten and brought Kiki to take photos with Fong Beibei's roommates. Kiki was very familiar with the 5 older sisters. In the past, when Poplar Fruit wasn't with Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit would ask Fong Beibei and her roommates to take care of Kiki if he was really busy. Especially Lin Xingshan, because of her relationship with Fong Beibei and her relationship with Poplar Fruit. She had long recognized Kiki as her goddaughter. Of course, the little girl was still used to calling Lin Xingshan's sister Shanshan. From Fong Beibei, Poplar Fruit had already learned that the 5 girls went to different places after graduation. Only Fong Beibei stayed at Higashiyama University to continue her postgraduate studies. Fong Beibei was also a direct postgraduate, but definitely not as fast as Poplar Fruit. Normally, it would take 5 years. Lin Xingshan, who had the best relationship with Fong Beibei, followed in the footsteps of her boyfriend, Wang Yuba, and joined the charity foundation organized by Poplar Fruit. She specialized in these charity projects. At least she wasn't too far away from Fong Beibei. The 2 girls could continue to shop together and chat. Lu Lei's grades were good. In her 3rd year, she focused on studying TOEFL. In her 4th year, she crazily applied to schools and was finally accepted by Princeton University in the United States. This caused quite a stir in her class. Of course, if it weren't for the fact that Fong Beibei didn't want to leave Yanghua and stay at Dongshan University for her master's degree, she would have chosen to continue her studies at another university. With the 2 gold medals she had won in international competitions, and the recommendation of an academician, all the famous universities at home and abroad would have lined up for her to choose from. However, Fong Beibei did not regret it. In her view, academics were just a decoration in life. Nothing was more precious than being able to live happily with the person she loved. Lu Lei could be considered as the one with the best prospects out of the 5 girls. The other girl with the surname Lu Ruhua, would go back to the Northeast after graduation. That was her hometown. She was very carefree. She didn't plan to rush to find a job. She planned to travel around the world first before starting a business in her hometown. Wu Yani experienced a few relationship changes outside of school. Later, she completely gave up and returned to school in her last year. However, her grades were not ideal. She would also go home after graduation. Her family had already found her a job in a public institution. Wu Yani just wanted to live an honest life and wait to get married. Wu Yani's experience was somewhat lamentable, but it also told the girls that love couldn't be rushed. Take it slow, don't treat it too differently, don't alienate it too much, and cherish it when you meet the right person. The 5 girls took a photo together this time. It could be considered as the last gathering before graduation. Who knew when or where the next time they would meet again? They took the wedding version of their graduation photos. Even Kiki changed into a beautiful wedding dress. However, in the photo, it had nothing to do with Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit's role today was very proper. He was just a photographer who followed behind the beauties. Of course, he was also in the photo a few times, but those were very few. Big brother Yang Why don't you change into a suit and take a photo with Beibei? Lin Xingshan and the others heckled. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, that won't do. My and Baobao's wedding photos will have to wait until we get married. I want to choose the best wedding dress for her. With that, Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei looked at each other affectionately. Both of them had smiles on their faces. I also want to wear the best wedding dress. Kiki held her big dress and shouted anxiously. That's for sure. When the time comes, we will dress our Kiki up as the world's most beautiful little princess. Fang Beibei smiled and touched Kiki's little head. The little girl immediately smiled happily. If Kiki is the most beautiful little princess, then what are you? Lin Xingshan joked. I know. Kiki raised her hand and said, Mama Ma is the most beautiful queen. I'm the queen's daughter, so I'm a princess. It had to be said that Poplar Fruit took 6 beautiful girls in wedding dresses to Higashiyama University today. During this period, it attracted the attention of many students. At this time, Poplar Fruit, who was going to appear on Where Are We Going, Daddy?, had become famous. Not long after, the students posted the photos they secretly took on social media, which were stolen by the entertainment reporters. For the time being, regardless of the unscrupulous reporters who used the headlines to fan the flames, the conscientious Tungsin News reported the news correctly. Top student goddess wearing a wedding dress to take graduation photos. Suspected to be close to the nation's father-in-law? This news was not without purpose. They quoted Poplar Fruit's words during an interview with Poplar Fruit 2 years ago. At that time, Poplar Fruit joked that he and Fang Beibei had no plans to get married for the time being. At the very least, they would have to wait until Fang Beibei graduated from her undergraduate degree. Now Fang Beibei was going to graduate from her undergraduate degree. Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei's 3-year-long love race was about to start a new process. Of course, Poplar Fruit had not responded to this news directly. On the other hand, Poplar Fruit's fans were in a good mood and teased. Oh really? They're not married yet? Chapter 1268. Oh really? They aren't married yet? Of course, this was just a joke made by Poplar Fruit's fans. Among Poplar Fruit's hardcore fans, they had long called Fang Beibei sister-in-law or mother-in-law. Fang Beibei had kept a low profile all these years, but her every move was still known by those hardcore fans. She was gentle and demure at home, intelligent and outstanding in school, and silently persevering in remote teaching. Until now, if there was nothing, she and Poplar Fruit maintained the frequency of teaching children in the mountains twice a week. She was kind and selfless in the rescue of stray pets. Everyone saw it. Fang Beibei might not be the most outstanding woman in the world, but compared to Poplar Fruit's character, she was definitely the most suitable woman for him. Many female fans who used to feel that Fang Beibei was not worthy of Poplar Fruit no longer felt that jealousy. Putting themselves in her shoes, they did not feel that they could be as good as Fang Beibei. It was because of this recognition that Poplar Fruit's fans were united. They sincerely wished their family well, and wished that Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei's relationship could finally be together. Of course, at this time, everyone's attention was no longer on the news that had yet to be released. In the middle of June, there was still nearly a month before the 3rd season of Where Are We Going, Dad? Was officially broadcast. However, Mango Station had already started a strong publicity campaign. It was just publicity. These were things that Mango Station was already familiar with. The television station, the official Weibo account, carried out official publicity, documentaries, interviews, and photos of the cute children's past lives. These were just the publicity on the surface. They threw a few fake and real news to the news reporters. From time to time, they would release some photos from the filming period of the show. They also looked for the media to disclose the old stories of the 5 families. The most suitable method for Mango Station's publicity was the news about one of the 5 new fathers, Lu Yi, and one of the 5 fast book hosts, Xia Na. The 2 of them used to be a couple, but after they broke up 9 years ago, they practically never contacted each other again. 9 years had passed, and the 2 people who had gone through 5 years of ups and downs together had their own happy families. But who knew if they had already let go of each other in their hearts? Given the nature of Mango TV, It would be a waste if they didn't use this controversial topic to stir things up. Under their guidance, the most interesting discussion among the netizens was the awkward situation that would arise when the father went to the Fast Lane dungeon. As Mango TV's trump card variety show, Fast Ben was also widely watched by the audience. Based on the previous 2 seasons, the 5 pairs of father and son definitely needed to step on the stage together. Of course, on the internet, after this topic became a hot topic, Xiana and Lu Yi cooperated and posted some vague comments, saying that they had already let go of that relationship. Even if they met again, they could just laugh it off. Is that really the case? No, at least until Xiaohan posted this chapter. There was no definite news about the 5 pairs of father and son in the Fast Lane. Regardless, with this topic being hyped up, whether it was fans of the Fast Lane or other viewers, they all paid attention to the upcoming broadcast of Where Are We Going, Dad? The effect was quite good, but Poplar Fruit couldn't deny it. Poplar Fruit couldn't complain about Mango TV's unscrupulous publicity. No matter what, Lu Yi and Xiana were a couple for 5 years. How long was 5 years? Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei hadn't even been together for 5 years. His previous first love was indeed 5 years, but when he broke up he was also in pain and lost. If it wasn't for Kiki and Fong Beibei's later appearance, Poplar Fruit didn't know how long he would have to go through emotional pain. Of course, if it wasn't for Kiki, Poplar Fruit might not have broken up with his girlfriend. But the past was the past after all. Lu Yi now had his goddess, Anna. A woman who appeared and saved him when he was on the verge of a mental breakdown. A woman who used gentle companionship to give him sweet dreams like a child. A woman who gave him the happiest marriage and 2 beautiful and cute mixed-race children. It was the same for Xiana. She married Zhang Jie, a talented singer who tolerated her, cared for her, and loved her. She didn't have any nostalgia for the past. However, even if they could face the past calmly, no one would want to reunite with it. No one would want to face their ex in front of their family and children. Even if they didn't have any grudges, they couldn't laugh and fool around in front of their ex. That was a past that they couldn't go back to. It was a past that was best not to look back on. Not to mention Lu Yi. Even Poplar Fruit himself didn't contact Lu Yunran anymore. He didn't want to hear any news about her from his classmates. On the day of her wedding, Poplar Fruit had already severed all ties with the past. Of course, on this matter, Poplar Fruit didn't take any sides or support. After all, he had always been friends with Xiana. As for Lu Yi, he was a new good friend that he had made on the show. At this time, Poplar Fruit didn't need to jump out and say anything. And the one that Poplar Fruit found interesting was still Lu Yi. On the show, he was a little frivolous. He was quite an interesting person. After recording the show, when everyone played together, he was also very cute like a child. During the entire promotional period, Lu Yi acted like he was on steroids. He went around snatching sofas from all the big celebrities and fighting for the headlines. He looked like he was mentally unstable. This might have been arranged by the program team, but when Poplar Fruit saw this, he laughed in his heart. Brother Yi is definitely enjoying himself. In comparison, Poplar Fruit and the other 3 fathers appeared to be quieter. They only cooperated with the program team to do some promotions. Very quickly, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's promotional video was released. Princess Kiki's beauty, cuteness, and mischievousness were undeniable. Even if one wasn't a fan of Poplar Fruit and Kiki, they would still praise her after watching the promotional video. Daddy, where are you? The most beautiful girl in history. This was the evaluation given by the netizens. The title of princess had not spread yet. It would only be known after the first episode of the show was released. But Poplar Fruit's performance in the promotional video made the netizens ridicule him. I've never seen such a boorish little Red Riding Hood and a mermaid. Poplar Fruit, you've lost all your moral integrity for your daughter. Uncle, you have the potential to dress up as a woman. Haha, Fong Beibei also rushed to watch the promotional video as soon as it was released. Regarding Poplar Fruit's performance, Fong Beibei laughed until her stomach hurt. Poplar Fruit's forehead drooped down. He gloomily realized that not only his girlfriend, but everyone he knew, including his mother, was making fun of him. What Poplar Fruit didn't expect was that this promotional video also gave Fang Beibei an inspiration. She decided that when she took wedding photos with Poplar Fruit in the future, she must take a set of photos of her wearing a suit and Poplar Fruit wearing a wedding dress. Hee. This is probably the video that Poplar Fruit wants to delete the most. The netizens' comments were very apt to explain Poplar Fruit's thoughts. Chapter 1269. Poplar Fruit was very busy. Although he looked like an ordinary teacher, he still had many part-time jobs. For example, New Translation Road Publishing House. Today, he had to go to the publishing house and listen to a strategy meeting for New Translation Road. That's right. As one of the shareholders and bosses, Poplar Fruit had no sense of responsibility. When he went to the meeting, he quietly became invisible and listened without speaking. New Translation Road was now developing more and more rapidly. The number of employees in the publishing house had exceeded 1,000. This did not include the hundreds of top translators in the industry who had signed contracts with the publishing house. After parting ways with Amazon, Zhang Yujie led her men to fight a tough battle in the United States. Not only did they cut a bloody path out of the international giants in the publishing industry, but they also created their own network channel. It was not a complete break. Zhang Yujie just changed the relationship between New Translation Road and Amazon from an affiliate to a cooperative relationship. Although there was no recommendation benefit, the books published by New Translation Road could cooperate with more giants and enter more sales channels. After half a year of development, it had proven that this was not a bad thing. New Translation Road had become the leading role in the domestic external publishing industry. Starting this year, New Translation Road's publishing strategy had also been greatly adjusted. In the past, online literature was the main source of business for New Translation Road. However, as the business grew bigger, and traditional literature had also been quite critical of New Translation Road recently. After several discussions, New Translation Road decided to start changing the development strategy of New Translation Road. This meeting was mainly to discuss this matter. New Translation Road had to change from the previous one-leg development to a multi-genre development. For example, traditional literature, such as genre literature like The Three-Body Problem. After Zhang Yujie made a conclusion, she also put forward 3 principles. First, we must ensure that the publishing of online literature does not decrease. Zhang Yujie raised a finger and said, "This is our foundation and our biggest source of profit. No matter how we develop, we must not lose this market that we have already won." Now, Zhang Yujie was getting more and more accustomed to her identity as a helmsman. Her temperament had changed from the previous sharp and fierce to the domineering aura of a heavy sword without a sharp edge. When she was summarizing, the executives below all listened attentively with a serious expression. Her cold and elegant face was imposing without being angry, intimidating all the executives who were older than her. Poplar Fruit did not count himself in. He was like a bystander, admiring the scene. Secondly, we have to do market research on traditional literature, genre literature, and other new projects. We have to select the best ones for translation. It's better to have nothing than something substandard. Looking at this woman who had become more mature because of her experience and her all-powerful demeanor on the rostrum, she had a different kind of charm. Looking at this woman who was called a thorny rose in the industry, her pair of phoenix eyes were charming and affectionate, but she kept people 1,000 miles away. Poplar Fruit was in a trance. It was as if his vision had traveled back to the past and returned to the door of room 503, block 13, Jinli district where he had lived before. What he saw was a handsome and sexy back. Poplar Fruit remembered very clearly that she was wearing a black leather jacket, tight jeans, carrying a bag, and wearing a watch necklace. All of them were high-end and expensive international brands. Hearing his footsteps coming from behind, she turned slightly and saw her fine short hair. She had a straightforward personality, a pretty oval face, delicate facial features, and a touch of delicate beauty under the light makeup. What left the deepest impression on Poplar Fruit was her sharp eyes. It was a sharpness that Poplar Fruit had never seen again. Just then, Zhang Yujie happened to be looking at him. It was as if her vision had returned from the past to the present. When Zheng Yujie and Poplar Fruit's eyes met, her eyes were slightly sluggish, and her majesty seemed to melt in an instant. Only Poplar Fruit could feel the softness and bitterness hidden behind those eyes. It was just a moment of fusion. Zheng Yujie raised her third finger, looked around, and said without hesitation, "Third, all departments must fully cooperate, especially the public relations department. Do a good job of monitoring public opinion, and fully cooperate with Vice President Poplar Fruit and the translation department to promote the industry reform." Industry reform? Poplar Fruit finally woke up from his memories. He remembered the idea that he had handed to Zheng Yujie 2 years ago. At that time, Poplar Fruit was full of enthusiasm and hoped to change the low status and low income of translators. However, 2 years later, he also knew the difficulty of implementing this idea. Although there had been some success in the new translation road, there was still strong resistance from other traditional publishing houses. The entire literature translation industry was still stagnant. He had not paid attention to it for a few months. Why did Zheng Yujie suddenly propose to promote industry reform? After the meeting, Poplar Fruit went to Zheng Yujie's office, and her assistant left. "Yujie, thank you." Poplar Fruit looked at her and said softly, "What are you thanking me for? Isn't this your dream?" Zheng Yujie smiled nonchalantly. She propped her arms on the table and cupped her beautiful face. She said softly, "Besides, your gratitude has never been sincere, has it?" Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly. This topic could not be continued, because Zheng Yujie habitually teased him. But now is not the best time, right? Poplar Fruit frowned and asked, "Aren't we in the middle of a transformation? If we rashly propose a reform, I'm afraid it will cause a strong backlash." "Don't worry, I'm not that stupid." Zheng Yujie threw him a dirty look, then picked up the pen on the table and played with it. She smiled lightly and said, "If it were 2 years ago, I would be very worried about the problem you mentioned. But it's different now." Zheng Yujie flipped through the table and handed a report to Poplar Fruit. She said, "In the past few years, our company's development has been the best in the industry. It is also because of this system that many translators who used to be affiliated with other publishing houses have come to our company. Many publishing houses are also discussing the possibility of this sharing. But you also know that capitalists are reluctant to share the cake in their hands, so they are still struggling." Zheng Yujie said confidently, "If we propose it now, we will be pushing the boat with the current, and there won't be much resistance. Besides, if our company takes the lead and sets the benchmark, it will give the Translators Association and those translators a good impression." Zheng Yujie said, "Since we have the strength and opportunity, we should stand up bravely and set the rules for the industry." New Translation Road was now the #1 publishing house in the world. If they really took the lead in this reform, then New Translation Road would truly become the best in the industry. They would also become the savior that all the translators who had broken free from the sea of bitterness would rush to seek refuge and worship. Chapter 1270. "Papa, what's the name of little brother Xian's little brother?" "What do you think?" "Ozo Xiaoxian Hihi. Wow, you're so talented." "There's more, Papa, there's more. It can also be called Mini Xian, just like Mama Ma's car." Early in the morning, the plane from Yangcheng to Shijiang finally landed. Although it was an overnight flight, Kiki, who had a good night's sleep, was now full of energy. The little girl held her father's hand and impatiently walked out of the plane. Kiki, who had just appeared on camera, made people's eyes light up. She was wearing a light yellow princess dress like a rape flower, and a laurel headband lined with yellow pearls. Other than that, she had no other accessories. Her appearance was particularly fresh and beautiful. Her soft and smooth hair fell to her waist, as pure and elegant as her princess dress. The audience looked at the little girl happily. She was finally wearing a princess dress again. Yes, how could a princess not wear a princess dress? Although strictly speaking, the request to appear in a princess dress was made by the production crew after the end of the second trip. Chi-Chi liked it a lot, so why couldn't she do it? Kiki. Not far away, the little friends who had arrived half an hour earlier were already shouting, They hadn't seen each other for 2 weeks. The little friends missed each other very much. Papa, hurry up. Kiki saw the little friends, and was also very happy. She held her father's hand and couldn't wait to fly up like a lark and fly to the little friend's side. Big brother Dejun. Big brother Nui. Although she couldn't fly, the little girl's laughter was as pleasant as a lark's and floated into the ears of the little friends. Poplar Fruit dragged his suitcase and followed behind. He smiled slightly when he saw the children happily hugging each other. Especially that child Nui. He actually hugged Kiki tightly and then put his head on Kiki's small shoulder and shouted happily, "Kiki, I missed you so much." And Poplar Fruit wasn't jealous at all. It was just a child. What was there to be jealous of? Teacher Lin. Poplar Fruit smiled and greeted Lin Yongjian. Then he hugged Lu Yi and bumped his chest. He smiled and said, "Brother Yi, welcome back. Do you know how much we miss you? How's the filming going?" "It's done. Don't worry, I won't miss any of the future trips." Lu Yi laughed. Plot requirement. After waiting for a while, Zhou Shimon's plane also arrived. He had a difficult task today. He had brought 2 children with him. The youngest child, Hao Hao, was only 2 years old. He believed that this would be the greatest challenge to him. Xian Xian. Chi-Chi took the lead, and the children once again hugged each other intimately and greeted each other with smiles on their faces. "Xian Xian, where is the mini Xian?" Kiki asked impatiently. Seeing Xian Xian's confused eyes, the little girl patted her own forehead and giggled. "Oh, I made a mistake. I was talking about your brother." "He's here." Zhou Shimon, who was carrying Hao Hao, said with a smile. He put Hao Hao down, took his hand and said, "Look, this is what your brother mentioned before. Sister Chi-Chi, brother Junjun and brother Nui." Hao Hao was a little shy, but compared to Nina, he was a little better. The little boy blinked and didn't say anything, but he didn't hide in his father's arms. "What's his name?" Kiki placed her hands on her knees and curiously looked at the little boy. At this time, Kiki's heart was filled with curiosity. Why does Xianxian's brother look different from Xianxian? And, the hair is different. "His name is Zhou Minhao." Xianxian interrupted. Xianxian held her brother's hand, but Hao Hao didn't have any intention of speaking. "Kiki, come here and play." Nui felt a little bored. He took a look, then turned around and ran away, studying the posters in the airport terminal. After picking up Kong Kong, everyone sat in the car arranged by the program crew, and began to drive to the place they were going to today. "Do you know where we're going?" In the car, Poplar Fruit asked his daughter with a smile. "I don't know, but Mama said it's a place with a lot of grapes." Kiki waved her little hand and said very sincerely, "It's because you like to eat grapes, right?" Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Yes. I like to eat grapes." The little girl smiled sweetly and nodded. "Wow, Kiki, look, what's that?" Poplar Fruit looked out of the corner of his eye and shouted, as if he had discovered a new world. He quickly called his daughter to turn around and look. I know, that's a camel." Kiki pressed her white and tender little hand against the car window and looked outside. She said happily, "Our teacher taught us before." "Really? But Daddy didn't ask you to look at that. Look over there." Poplar Fruit pointed at a large sculpture in the distance and laughed. Kiki looked at it in confusion and shook her head. "Then I don't know. That's Sun Wukong. If your brother Nui saw it, he would definitely be very excited." Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "That's right. How would you know that Nui was already waving his hands like a little duck in the car?" Actually, Poplar Fruit was feeling a little guilty. Did he let Kiki do as she pleased? Although the little girl liked Pleasant Goat, and liked the cartoons that children like nowadays, compared to Nui, Kiki had no understanding of traditional Chinese culture. One had to know that the person who raised Nui was Nui's mother. Even a Frenchman could pay so much attention to her child's inheritance of traditional Chinese culture. As for him, who was about to get a doctorate in Chinese, a scholar with deep knowledge of traditional Chinese culture, he actually fell behind Nui's mother in terms of education. If this spread out, wouldn't he become a laughing stock? Of course, Poplar Fruit didn't care about other people's opinions. However, when it came to Kiki's education, Poplar Fruit felt very ashamed. Thinking about it carefully, did Kiki not like traditional Chinese culture? That's not it. Sometimes, when he used stories from the Analects of Confucius to reason with her, not only did the little girl listen with great interest, she could even recite them backwards. In turn, she would use these stories to coax the younger siblings in the kindergarten. The problem was poplar fruit's inaction and the current situation of traditional Chinese culture. No, he couldn't blame it on the market because this was an uncontrollable factor. However, Kiki's education was controllable. Perhaps when he went back, he should ask Nuyi's mother for advice and learn how to raise children's interest in traditional Chinese culture. Poplar fruit made a decision in his heart. Right. There was a domestic cartoon that was about to be released. It was called something like The Return of the Great Sage. Poplar fruit planned to bring Kiki to watch it in the cinema after it was released. From watching the movie, Kiki's interest in the 4 classic novels, Journey to the West. Chapter 1271. It's so hot. After Kiki got out of the car, she felt a gust of dry and hot air blowing against her face. The sun in the sky was shining brightly on the ground, and the ground was like a hot frying pan roasting the people on the ground. Poplar fruit was also caught off guard by the hot weather. He quickly opened his backpack and took out a breathable, sunscreen jacket for his daughter to wear. He smiled and said to Lin Yongjian, "The surface temperature is at least 40 degrees. 43 degrees. Lin Yongjian laughed. So accurate? Teacher Lin even brought a thermometer? Zhou Shimin came forward with Hao Hao in his arms. Here, the thermometer is over there. Lin Yongjian pointed at a large pillar not far away. It turned out that this large pillar was a thermometer made in the shape of a golden cudgel, but it was a bit too big. It was at least 10 meters high. The large group walked to the camel team not far from where they were parked. It turned out that Poplar Fruit and the others needed to ride the camel to the next rendezvous point. This is a camel. Kiki was very happy to see a large creature that could only be seen in kindergarten-colored books. She turned around and saw Kong Kong, who had just walked over. She couldn't wait to take Kong Kong's brother's hand and introduce him to the camel. Don't be afraid. Kong Kong obviously misunderstood. She pulled her sister's hand and hid behind Poplar Fruit's uncle. Kiki was also a little confused. She walked and looked at the big guys on the ground reluctantly. Xian and Dejun were 2 careless and bold children. When they saw the camel lying there docile, they bravely walked in front of the camel and shook their heads to look at it. Rumble, rumble. Perhaps the camel was annoyed, or maybe it saw Xian's curly hair, and its nose itched. It suddenly sneezed and spat saliva on Xian's face. Oh! Xian quickly pulled up his clothes and wiped it. Dejun didn't fall for it. He pulled Xian and quickly retreated. He said, "Run, it's angry." Looking at the embarrassed looks of the 2 curious babies, the fathers all laughed shamelessly. Kiki also giggled, but she was not gloating. She took her father's hand and said with joy, "Papa, why is a camel the same as an alpaca? Do you like to spit so much?" It turned out that the little guy had remembered those funny alpaca videos that he had watched with his father in the past. After witnessing Xian's tragedy, the other children looked at the camels with some fear. However, Kiki still couldn't suppress her curiosity towards this strange creature. She took her father's hand and moved towards another camel with joy and fear. "Papa, can I touch it?" Kiki turned her head and looked at her father, hoping to gain some courage from her father. "Ask your uncle," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Kiki plucked up her courage and asked the Uyghur man beside the camel. However, it seemed that the Uyghur man didn't understand Chinese. He scratched his head and turned to ask his companions for help. However, it seemed that his companions didn't speak Chinese either. Although Chinese had been widely used in Xinjiang, and the Han Chinese population had also occupied a certain scale in Xinjiang, it could still be seen that many traditional Uyghurs still couldn't speak Chinese. Poplar Fruit could understand the Uyghur language spoken by the other party. Compared to last year, Poplar Fruit's Uyghur language level had changed from a half-baked to an expert level. He smiled and translated for the other party. What is Poplar Fruit saying? The fathers looked at each other, and the program staff were also confused. Only the local guide's eyes lit up. He could hear that Poplar Fruit was speaking very fluent and pure official Uyghur language. Could it be that Poplar Fruit was also a Han Chinese who grew up in Xinjiang? However, he wasn't interested in asking. He just wanted to be a silent guide. However, the audience was happy because they could see the subtitles that the program team had made on the show. They knew that Poplar Fruit was communicating with the other party in Uyghur language. However, this was only the tip of the iceberg of Poplar Fruit's super language talent. When everyone was slightly surprised, they recalled the news of the terrorist incident last year and weren't too surprised. Kiki, Uncle said that you can touch it gently. The camel is very obedient and won't bite. Poplar Fruit smiled and translated for his daughter. Thank you, Uncle. Kiki held her father's hand obediently and looked at the Uyghur uncle who was leading the camel. Scorching mat. Poplar Fruit smiled. Kiki also followed suit and said, Scorching mat. The Uyghur uncle waved his hand shyly. After getting permission, Kiki held her father's hand with one hand and moved forward with the other hand in fear and curiosity. The little girl still needed her father's support from behind to have the courage to explore such a huge and strange creature. The camel's face was very big, almost as big as Kiki's upper body. However, this one was very docile. It didn't spit at Xian like the previous one. It only used its big eyes to look gently at the cute human girl in front of it. It didn't know why, but the camel felt that the little girl in front of it was very friendly. Camel, can I be friends with you? Kiki's little hand stopped in midair. She didn't have enough courage and could only try to ask first. Pfft. The camel's large nostrils snorted. It was a little scary, but it lowered its head and gently nudged its head forward, rubbing it against Chi-Chi's small palm. The little girl was pleasantly surprised. She was a little scared and a little excited. She couldn't believe it and gently rubbed the obedient camel in front of her. She turned her head happily and looked at her father with her big eyes that could speak. She was so happy that she couldn't speak. Poplar Fruit was also a little surprised. He smiled and said to his daughter, Look, it likes you very much. The Uyghur man who was leading the camel next to them was even more surprised. He knew that his camel was very docile, but he had never seen it move its head so ingratiatingly for others to rub. Kiki, why is your camel so obedient? Her friends surrounded her enviously, especially Nuai. He eagerly stretched out his hand and asked, Can I touch it like you? Of course. But you have to get its permission first. Kiki gently rubbed the big camel and said without turning her head. The big camel actually closed its eyes in comfort. Of course it's allowed. The camel very docilely accepted the children's touch. I don't dare. Xian, who had just been sprayed with saliva, said with a sobbing voice. He looked at his father with envy and fear. What are you afraid of? It's not like it's going to eat you. Zhou Shimin smiled and scared his son again. He hugged Hao and also touched the big camel. Then, only Xian was left there anxiously. Xiaohan is 1 year older today. Add a chapter. Ask for blessings, greater than over equal to / that you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.